The waitress who didn't flinch. She was nobody. A waitress with tired shoes and an empty bank account. Then she told a crime lord's fiancé the truth in front of a room full of people, and a man in the shadows decided her life was about to change forever. What he didn't know? She'd pull his entire empire down with her. If you love stories about quiet courage, dangerous love, and the kind of revenge that burns slow and clean, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop the name of your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled tonight. Let's begin. The rain had been falling on St. Clair Avenue since 4 in the afternoon, and by 7 it had turned the street into a long black mirror. Yellow cab lights smeared across the puddles. A doorman at the Meridian Hotel across the way was shaking water off a red umbrella like he was trying to teach it a lesson. And inside the warm glass front of Ember and Oak, one of the 3 most expensive restaurants in the city, Lena Brooks was counting the minutes until her shift ended and praying her feet would last that long. She was 29 years old. She had $11 and some change in her checking account. Rent was due in 6 days, and her landlord, a thin man named Mr. Prashad, who always smelled faintly of cardamom and disappointment, had already slid a note under her door that read, in careful block letters, "Last time, Lena." I mean it. She didn't blame him. She'd said last time herself more than once, to more than one person. You say it enough, it stops meaning anything. Table 12 wants another bottle of the Barolo, said Hector, sliding past her with a tray balanced on his shoulder. And the guy on 6 is trying to flirt with you again. He's 62 and married. So flirt back. Maybe he tips in gold bars. Lena let out a small, tired laugh and tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. She caught her reflection in the polished brass of the service station. Hollow cheeks, sharper than they used to be. Eyes that had once been described by a man who no longer mattered as the color of lake water in November. She looked like someone who used to be someone. That was the truth of it. 2 years ago, she'd been Detective Brooks, Financial Crimes Division, the youngest investigator in her unit and the one everybody quietly hated because she didn't stop when she was told to. She'd been 3 months into a case involving a shell company laundering about $40 million through a chain of laundromats in the South End when her captain called her into his office, closed the door, and told her the case was dead. Dead how? She'd asked. Dead as in buried. Dead as in you sign this form and you take 3 weeks off, and when you come back you work auto theft. She hadn't signed the form. She'd kept digging. 6 weeks later, a folder of photographs had appeared in her locker. Her mother leaving a grocery store, her sister's kids walking home from school, her own apartment building with a small red circle drawn around her front window in what looked like lipstick. She'd turned in her badge the next morning. Her captain hadn't looked surprised. Now she carried plates. Now she counted tips. Lena. It was Diane, the floor manager, tapping her on the shoulder with 2 knuckles, the way she did when she didn't want to be overheard. Change of plans. Mr. Voss's party just confirmed for 9. Private room. You're on it. Lena's stomach went cold in a way she couldn't quite explain. I thought Marco had that table. Marco called out, stomach thing. You're up. Dee, I don't know the wine list for the private room. I haven't done. You've done it twice. You're fine. And Lena. Diane lowered her voice another notch. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't look at faces. You don't ask questions. You understand me? I understand. Good girl. Diane squeezed her arm once, quick and almost motherly, and walked away. Lena stood there for a second longer than she should have, feeling the weight of that small sentence settle on her shoulders. You don't look at faces. She already knew whose face she wasn't supposed to look at. Everyone in the city knew. Us. Adrian Voss was the kind of name people said carefully, the way you might handle a loaded pistol you weren't sure had the safety on. He owned Ember and Oak. He owned the hotel across the street and the parking garage behind it, and probably, if you pulled the thread hard enough, the streetlights too. On paper, he was a real estate developer, a restaurateur, a donor to children's hospitals, and the symphony. Off paper, and there was always an off paper with men like Voss, he was something else. Something people talked about in kitchens and never in dining rooms. Lena had seen his name in her old case files, not in the main column, in the footnotes. The places investigators put names they weren't ready to write yet. She'd never seen his face. Table's ready, Hector said, bumping her hip as he passed. Go be invisible. She tried. The private room at Ember and Oak was at the end of a hallway lined with framed black and white photographs of old opera singers, women with their mouths open mid-area, frozen forever in the act of being heard. The door was walnut, heavy, and when Lena pushed it open, the temperature of the whole world seemed to drop about 4 degrees. There were 7 of them at the table. 6 men, 1 woman. The men were in dark suits that fit too well to be off any rack she knew about. They weren't loud. They weren't laughing. That was the first thing she noticed, how quiet rich men were when they weren't performing for anybody. The second thing she noticed was that none of them looked at her when she came in. Not one. That was deliberate. That was training. The third thing she noticed was the woman. She sat at the far end of the table in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Lena's car, and her hair was the kind of blonde that only happened in salons on streets Lena couldn't afford to walk down. She had a long neck, a thin mouth, and eyes the pale blue of winter ice on a pond you shouldn't step on. She was beautiful, the way a knife is beautiful. You admired it, and then you kept your hand away from the edge. "You're late," the woman said without looking up from her phone. Lena checked the clock on the wall. 8:59. "I apologize, ma'am," she said. "I'll get you started with water right away." "I didn't ask you to apologize. I said you were late." One of the men, gray at the temples, murmured something under his breath. The woman's head snapped up. "What was that, Marcus?" "Nothing, Serena." "It didn't sound like nothing." "I said the girl just got here. Give her a minute." Serena Vale, because of course that was who it was. Lena had pieced it together the second she saw the dress. Smiled without any warmth getting as far as her eyes. "Oh, the girl just got here, I see. Thank you, Marcus. I was confused." She turned that smile on Lena. "Come closer, sweetheart. Let me see you." Lena stayed where she was. "I said come closer." One of the other men, shaved head, broken nose somewhere in his past, cleared his throat. "Serena." "Hush, Dmitri." She crooked one finger at Lena. "Come. Here." Lena walked 3 steps forward, stopped about 6 feet from the end of the table, folded her hands behind her back, and waited. Her face was calm. Her heart was not. Serena tilted her head, examining her like she was a handbag with a questionable stitch. "What's your name?" "Lena." "Lena what?" "Brooks." "Brooks." Serena rolled it around in her mouth like she was tasting wine and had decided she didn't like it. "Lena Brooks. Tell me, Lena Brooks, how long have you worked here?" 14 months? 14 months. And in 14 months, no one has taught you how to enter a private room properly. Lena didn't answer. She'd been taught 9 different ways. She just hadn't bowed fast enough. "When you come into a room like this," Serena said, her voice getting that soft, careful quality that certain women used when they were about to do damage, "you come in with your head down. You don't make eye contact. You are not a guest. Do you understand me? You are not a person in this room. You are the hands that bring the bread. That's all. Do you understand?" "I understand what you're saying, ma'am." "Say it." "I'm sorry?" "Say it. I am not a person in this room. Say it out loud." The silence that fell on the table was the specific kind of silence that happens when everybody's waiting to see whether someone's about to cry. The man called Marcus was looking at his napkin. Dmitri was looking at the ceiling. One of the others, a younger guy with kind eyes, had gone pale. Lena felt something very small and very old wake up in the middle of her chest. She'd spent 2 years being quiet. 2 years carrying plates and saying right away, "Sir," and of course, "Ma'am," and pretending she wasn't the same woman who had once walked into an interrogation room and broken a crooked accountant in 43 minutes flat. She'd made peace with the quiet. She'd told herself the quiet was survival. She'd told herself a lot of things. But there was a difference between survival and bowing. And somewhere in the last 2 years, she'd forgotten which was which. She raised her eyes and looked Serena Vale directly in the face. "No, ma'am," she said. "I'm not going to say that." The air in the room changed. It wasn't loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was the sound of 6 men at a table all deciding in the same quarter second that they needed to be very, very still. Marcus stopped fiddling with his napkin. Dimitri's eyes came down from the ceiling. The kind-eyed young man actually winced, like he was about to watch somebody get hit by a car. Serena's smile stayed where it was, but something behind it shifted, And for the first time, Lena saw what she really looked like underneath, which was scared. Scared and furious that she was scared, which is the worst kind of person to be across a table from. "What did you say to me?" I said, "No, ma'am. I'll bring your water, I'll take your order, I'll refill your glasses, and I'll be polite to you for the rest of the evening. But I'm not going to stand here and say I'm not a person. I am a person. I'm just a person with a worse job than you have. That's the only difference between us." Someone, Dmitri, she thought, made a short sound that could have been a cough or could have been a laugh strangled at birth. Serena's fingers curled around her wine glass. Slowly, deliberately, the way you curl your hand around something you're thinking about throwing. "Do you have any idea," she said, and her voice had gone very quiet, "who I am?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then you know what I can do to you?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you're still standing there?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Lena took a slow breath. The back of her neck was prickling. Her feet had stopped hurting, which was strange. She hadn't realized her feet could stop hurting. Every part of her body was suddenly very awake. "Because I'd rather lose this job tonight," she said, "than go home and know I bowed for you." For about 3 seconds, nobody in the room moved. And then, from the far corner, from a chair Lena hadn't even fully registered, set back a little from the table, half in shadow because the lamp above it had been dimmed lower than the others, a man's voice said, very quietly, "Serena." Just the name. One word. Spoken the way you might say stop to a dog that had wandered too close to the street. Serena Vale stopped. Lena didn't look. She knew better than to look. She kept her eyes on the woman in cream, who was now looking at the man in the corner the way a child looks at a parent who has just walked in on something. "Adrian," Serena said, I heard what you were only." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Lena had known men like that before. Men whose quiet was louder than other men's shouting. The captain who'd buried her case had been one. Her father, a very long time ago, had been another. "Leave the girl alone," the man in the corner said. "Sit down. Drink your wine." "Adrian, sit down." Serena sat down. The kind-eyed young man exhaled so hard Lena saw his shoulders drop 2 full inches. Marcus picked up his napkin again. Dmitri quietly refilled his own glass, as if the distraction of pouring might erase the last 30 seconds. "Miss Brooks." The voice came from the corner again, calm, unhurried. A voice that had never once in its life needed to repeat itself. "Yes, sir." "Look at me, please." She did. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, maybe 42. Black hair cut close, shot through with early silver on the sides. A long face, angular, with the kind of dark eyes that didn't give you anything back. Not coldness, not warmth, just attention. The suit he was wearing was charcoal and looked like it had been made for his body and his body only. One hand rested on the arm of the chair. The other held a glass of something amber that he hadn't touched since Lena had walked into the room. She was sure of that. She didn't know how she was sure. Adrian Voss looked at her for what felt like a very long time. Then he said, "Thank you for taking care of my table tonight. Please tell the sommelier we'd like to try the 09 Brunello. 2 bottles, and a third of whatever you personally think is the best bottle in this building under $300. "Sir, I want to know what you'd pick." Lena's mouth went dry. "The Cornas," she said, before her brain had a chance to catch up with her tongue. "From the Northern Rhone. The 14. It's peppery. It fights back a little." Something moved at the corner of Adrian Voss's mouth. It wasn't a smile. It was the place a smile might have come from, if he'd let it. "Then bring that one first." "Yes, sir." "Miss Brooks." "Yes, sir." "You'll keep your job tonight." "Thank you, sir." "You're welcome." She turned, walked to the door, opened it, stepped into the hallway, closed it behind her, and stood very still in the corridor of opera singers with her hand still on the brass handle. Her knees were shaking, not a lot, just enough to notice. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in front of anybody in 5 years, and she wasn't about to start in a hallway. But when Hector came around the corner carrying a tray of bread baskets and said, "Hey, you good?" she had to press her lips together for a second before she could answer. "Yeah," she said. "I'm good. I need the 14 Cornas from the back cellar and the 09 Brunello. 2 bottles." The Brunello is in the... I know where it is. Move. He moved. She made it through the rest of the service on a kind of autopilot she didn't fully understand. She brought wine. She took orders. Most of the men ordered steak. Serena ordered a salad she barely touched. Adrian ordered the lamb and ate exactly half of it. She refilled water glasses without being asked. She didn't say a word more than she had to. Nobody at that table looked at her again except him. She tried not to notice it. She noticed it anyway. Every time she entered the room, his eyes came up. Just for a second, just long enough to register that she was there, and then went back to whatever he'd been doing. It wasn't leering. It wasn't anything you could have accused him of. It was just acknowledgement. The way a man might glance at a piece on a chessboard he'd decided to keep an eye on. Serena didn't look at her at all. Serena's hand had shaken slightly the first time she'd lifted her wine glass after Adrian spoke, and Lena had clocked that tremor and filed it away, because that was a cop's instinct, and 2 years of plates hadn't killed it. Around 11:15, the party started breaking up. Marcus left first, taking a call on his way to the door, and speaking in a low, rapid Russian into his phone. Dmitri and 2 of the others left together. The kind-eyed young man stopped on his way out and slipped a folded $50 bill into Lena's palm with a murmured, "You're okay, Miss Brooks. You hear me? You're okay." Then he was gone too. Serena left without looking at her. Adrian held Serena's coat for her at the door. Their goodbye was a single kiss on the corner of the mouth, delivered by Serena, received by Adrian without any visible response. He might as well have been getting his temperature taken. And then the room was empty, except for the 2 of them. Lena was clearing plates. She had her back half turned to him, and she didn't realize he hadn't left with the others until she heard his voice behind her, quieter than before. "Miss Brooks?" She straightened up too fast and a butter knife clattered off a plate. She caught it before it hit the floor. Reflex, old muscle memory from a life she didn't have anymore. "Yes, sir." "Come sit down for a minute, please." She hesitated. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I'm not going to ask you to do anything you don't want to do. I'm going to offer you a job. You can say no, and I'll have someone drive you home, and you'll never see me again. That's it. That's the whole thing." She looked at him. He was sitting at the end of the table now, the place Serena had been, and his hands were folded on the white cloth in front of him. His glass was still full. Something in Lena's chest, the small, old, waking up thing, said very clearly, "Don't." And something else, something tired and angry and $11 in the bank, said, "Sit down." She sat down. He looked at her for a moment, and then he said, "I assume you know who I am." "I have an idea, sir." "Call me Adrian." "I'd rather not, sir." He inclined his head, accepting it. "Fair enough. Mr. Voss, then." "Mr. Voss." "Miss Brooks, my personal assistant of the last 4 years took another position 3 weeks ago. I've been interviewing replacements. I've not been impressed. I need someone intelligent, discreet, and unafraid. I think you might be all 3. With respect, sir, you've known me for 2.5 hours, and you watched me nearly lose my job." "I watched you nearly lose your job because you refused to be humiliated. That's different." "Is it?" "In my line of work, Miss Brooks. It's the only difference that matters." She didn't answer. He leaned back a little in his chair. "The position pays $240,000 a year, plus benefits, plus a housing allowance. You would report directly to me. You would travel with me when necessary. Your hours would be long, but your evenings, as a rule, would be your own. I don't sleep much. I need someone who can keep up." She stared at him. $240,000. Her father had not made that much in his entire life. Her father had died with a mortgage he was 4 months behind on. "Why me?" she said. "I told you." "No, you told me what you need. You didn't tell me why me. There are 1,000 women in this city with better resumes than mine who would sit down and say, 'I'm not a person if you paid them $40,000 a year, never mind 240. Why me?'" He was quiet for a moment, then, unexpectedly, "Because I've met your type 3 times in my life, Miss Brooks. Every single one of them was more useful to me than the 10 people standing next to them. And every single one of them walked in the door looking at me the same way you did tonight, like I was a problem they hadn't solved yet." Her throat went dry. "I was a cop," she said. The words came out before she could stop them. "I know." She blinked. "Financial crimes," he said. You left the department in June of the year before last. You filed no official grievance. You've been working here for 14 months. You live on Waverly Place, apartment 3C. Your landlord's name is Jay Prashad. Your mother is in a care facility in Ridgefield County. Your sister teaches 5th grade in a town called Wellsford, and her husband drives a delivery truck, and they have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. The boy plays hockey badly, and the girl draws horses. He paused. I had a file opened on you the moment you stepped into my private room. I had it closed before you brought the wine. Lena felt her hands go numb at the wrists. If you're trying to scare me, I'm not. I'm telling you because if you're going to work for me, you should know exactly who you're working for. I don't like lies, Miss Brooks. Not even small ones. Not even polite ones. I would rather tell you something ugly and have you decide than tell you something pretty and find out later you can't handle the truth. I've been burned too many times by people who needed me to be prettier than I am. He stopped. His eyes didn't move off hers. So now you know, he said. You can stand up and walk out of this room. I'll pay your rent this month as an apology for Serena's behavior. I'll never contact you again, or you can come to work on Monday morning at 8 a.m. at the address on this card. Think about it. Take your time. I have all night. He slid a plain white card across the table. No name. No logo, just an address in a part of the city where the buildings were tall and the sidewalks were always clean, printed in small black letters in the center. Lena looked at the card. She didn't pick it up. May I ask you something, Mr. Voss? Anything. Your fiancée. She's going to hate me. Yes. That's not a problem for you? Something passed behind his eyes. Just for an instant, like weather moving fast across a far hill. No, Miss Brooks, he said. It's not a problem for me. She picked up the card. She didn't remember walking home. She remembered the rain had stopped. She remembered the puddles on St. Clair Avenue had gone from black to silver under the streetlights, and she remembered standing at a crosswalk on the corner of 8th and Hollander for a very long time before she realized the light had already turned green twice and the little white man was walking without her. She got to her apartment at almost 2 in the morning. The stairs up to the 3rd floor smelled like somebody's dinner. Curry, garlic, a top note of fried something. Her key stuck in the lock, the way it always did, and she jiggled it twice and leaned her weight on the door and finally got in. She stood in the middle of her one-room apartment with her coat still on. The card was in her right hand. The $50 bill from the kind-eyed young man was in her left. Her feet had started hurting again, and for some reason that, more than anything else, made her want to sit down on the floor and not get up. She didn't sit down. She walked to the kitchen counter, set the card on it, and stood there looking at it for a long time. The address was in the Dumont district. She'd driven past those buildings 100 times. The one on the card was the tallest of them, a black glass tower that, in daylight, looked like a knife standing on end. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. 4 words. He's not a good man. She stared at it. The sender showed no name, no contact, just a string of digits that probably belonged to a burner phone halfway across the city. She typed back, "Who is this?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Someone who was you 18 months ago. She stood very still. Don't take the job, detective. Whatever he told you, it's not the whole thing. It's never the whole thing with him. Then, if you need to talk, meet me Wednesday. Dalton Park. The bench by the duck pond. 3 p.m. Come alone. Then, after a long pause, he'll know you're coming. He knows everything, but there are some things he pretends not to know. That's the only edge you'll ever have. The messages stopped. Lena stared at her phone until the screen went dark. Somewhere in the apartment building, a baby started to cry. Somewhere outside, a car alarm went off and kept going for almost a full minute before anybody did anything about it. A train rattled over the elevated tracks 3 blocks east, and her one kitchen window vibrated faintly in its frame, the way it always did, at exactly 2:17 in the morning when the last freight of the night came through. She looked at the card on the counter. She looked at her phone. She thought about the photographs in her locker, 18 months ago. The red circle drawn on her apartment window. Her mother with a paper grocery bag. Her sister's kids in their winter coats. She thought about $11 in a checking account. And last time, Lena. I mean it. She thought about a woman in a cream dress who had told her to say, I am not a person, and a man in the corner of a room who had said Serena in a voice that had made a whole table sit down. She thought about the way Adrian Voss had looked at her. Not like a man looks at a woman, but like a chess player looks at a piece he's considering. That should have terrified her. It did terrify her. But underneath the terror was something she hadn't felt in 2 years and hadn't admitted she missed, and it took her a minute to put a name on it. She missed being looked at like she mattered, even by the wrong kind of man, maybe especially by him. She walked to the small closet by her front door and pulled down a cardboard box from the top shelf. Inside, wrapped in an old wool scarf, was a notebook, black cover, bent corners. Her old case notebook, the one they hadn't taken from her when she'd turned in her badge, because technically it was her personal property, and technically nobody had bothered to check. She opened it to the back where the footnotes lived. Voss A. Possible interest in Dominica Shell, Carrington Holdings. See also M. Kane, Enforcer. Rumored, not confirmed. Under that, in her own small, careful handwriting, S. Vale, Fiancée, socialite cover, access to financial records suspected but not verified. Watch her. She hadn't looked at this notebook in over a year. She sat down at her kitchen counter, still in her coat, still in her wet shoes, and she read every page from front to back. By the time she finished, the sun was coming up over the elevated tracks, and she had made up her mind. She was going to take the job. She was going to walk into Adrian Voss's building on Monday morning at 8 a.m., and she was going to smile. And she was going to be the best personal assistant he'd ever hired. And somewhere along the way, very quietly, without him ever quite seeing her do it, she was going to finish the case she'd started 3 years ago. She didn't know yet that somebody else was already doing their own quiet work inside his empire. She didn't know yet that the woman in the cream dress had been building a knife for almost a decade, and that the man named Marcus, who had looked at his napkin and said, "Give her a minute," had been sharpening it. She didn't know yet that the text messages on her phone had not been sent by a friend. She drank the last of her cold coffee, turned off the kitchen light, and went to take a shower. She had 3 days before Monday. On the counter, face up under the overhead bulb, the small white card waited, and outside her window the city kept doing what cities do, breathing, bleeding, forgetting, and beginning again. While on the other side of town, in a black glass tower that looked like a knife standing on end, a man who had not slept all night sat at a desk on the 43rd floor and picked up a phone and said 2 words into it. "She'll come." The voice on the other end said something back. Adrian Voss listened. Then he said, very softly, almost to himself, "Good. Let her." He set the phone down. Outside his window, the sky was going pale at the edges, and the river beyond the city was the color of lake water in November. Monday morning came colder than it had any right to in early October. Lena stood across the street from the black glass tower at 741, holding a paper cup of coffee she wasn't drinking, looking up at the building the way you look at a mountain you've decided to climb without the right boots. She'd bought a new blouse on Saturday at a consignment place on Grove Street. Cream-colored silk, small pearl buttons, $10. She'd picked cream on purpose. If Serena Vale was going to hate her for existing, Lena figured she might as well hate her in the same color she'd worn to the restaurant. Small rebellions. She'd always been good at those. They were what had ended her career and apparently what was about to start whatever this was. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her mother's single pair of real earrings, small gold studs from 1987, sat in her ears. She'd tried 3 different shades of lipstick in her bathroom mirror before wiping them all off and going without. At 7:48, she crossed the street. The lobby of 1200 Dumont Plaza was all black marble and brushed steel, the kind of space designed to make ordinary people feel like they'd wandered into the wrong dream. A security desk ran along the left wall, manned by 2 men in dark suits who looked less like guards and more like the kind of people guards called when things got complicated. The shorter one looked up before she'd taken 3 steps in. "Miss Brooks?" Not a question. "Good morning. 43rd floor. Elevator bank on your right, the one farthest from the door. Mr. Voss's keycard is already programmed. Please place your thumb on the reader." She placed her thumb on the reader. A small green light blinked twice and went dark. "Mr. Callahan will meet you when the doors open. Have a good first day, Miss Brooks." She nodded and walked to the elevator, and as she walked, she thought about how nobody had asked for her name, or her ID, or her signature, or anything else that working people had to produce every morning just to earn the right to be in a building. The system already knew her. The system had been waiting for her. That had a weight to it that she didn't entirely like. The elevator had no buttons inside, just a single brushed steel panel and a small black camera in the ceiling corner. The doors closed and she felt the soft pressure in her ears as the car began to climb, fast and silent. She used the ride to practice her face. Neutral, attentive, not eager, never eager. Eager was what rich men ate for breakfast and left the bones of on the sidewalk. At the 43rd floor, the doors opened onto a reception area that didn't look like a reception area. No desk, no chairs, just a long hallway with a floor of pale wood, and at the end of it, a tall man in a navy suit standing with his hands clasped in front of him like he was waiting for a bride to come down an aisle. He had iron gray hair cut very short, a boxer's shoulders, and eyes that looked like they had cataloged her weight, height, posture, and probable pulse rate before she'd fully stepped off the elevator. "Miss Brooks, I'm Thomas Callahan. I run Mr. Voss's household and personal affairs." His voice was soft, almost formal, with an accent she couldn't immediately place, something that had passed through Dublin and then spent 30 years forgetting it. "It's my job to make sure your first 2 weeks go smoothly. Please follow me." "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." "Thomas, please. Mr. Callahan sounds like my father, and my father was a cheerful drunk who died owing money to 3 different churches." She almost smiled. She didn't quite let it happen. "Thomas." He led her down the hall. The doors along the way were all shut. She counted them, 6 on the left, 4 on the right. At the end of the corridor, double doors of dark wood stood open onto a space that made her stop walking for half a second before she remembered that stopping was exactly the kind of thing she'd told herself not to do. It wasn't an office. It was a library with a desk at one end. 3 walls of books floor to ceiling on shelves that looked older than the building. A long window, maybe 40 feet wide, gave a view of the river and the bridges and the low haze of morning sitting on the water like a second skin. The desk was enormous, a slab of dark stone polished to a soft gloss, and behind it, standing with his back to her, looking out at the city with a telephone held loosely in his right hand, was Adrian Voss. He was speaking in what sounded like Italian, low, fast, with the kind of tired edge in his voice that came from having said the same thing twice already and being about to say it a third time. Thomas gestured to a pair of leather chairs near the door and murmured, "He'll be with you in a moment. Tea? Coffee? Water?" "Water, please." He nodded and slipped out. Lena sat, crossed her legs at the ankle, and set her paper cup down on the small side table. Her hands were steady. She checked them to be sure. They were. The part of her that was still a detective was running a slow inventory of the room. The books, mostly hardback, mostly nonfiction, heavy on history and economics, with a long middle shelf of poetry that surprised her. A painting on the one wall not covered in books. Abstract, the kind of thing that probably cost more than a house. 2 cameras, discreet, in the upper corners of the room. A panic button, almost certainly somewhere under the lip of the desk. Adrian Voss finished his phone call, said something short and final in Italian, and set the phone down on the desk without turning around. He stayed facing the window for another few seconds, long enough that Lena understood this was deliberate, a small transition from one mode to another. And then he turned. He was wearing gray, a different suit from Friday night, but the same kind of fit. His hair was damp at the temples, as if he'd been up earlier than most people and had already done whatever men like him did in the early morning. He looked at her for a moment without speaking, the same way he had at the restaurant, as if making sure she was the same person he remembered. "Miss Brooks, you're early." 9 minutes, sir." "I noticed. If you prefer I wait downstairs until 8 exactly, I can—" "Don't do that." He came around the desk and stood in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her chin slightly to keep eye contact. "If you're early, come in. If you're late, come in. Don't perform punctuality for me. I don't like performances." He studied her for another half second, then added, without any change in tone, "You slept badly." "How did you—" "Your eyes. Don't worry. I've slept badly since 1998. It's how you know I work for a living." He gestured to the chair he'd just risen from, on the opposite side of the stone desk, and she stood and followed him over. He didn't sit down on his own side. He leaned against the front of the desk, one ankle crossed over the other, hands loose at his sides. We're going to do this the way I do most things, Miss Brooks, quickly. I'll tell you what the job is. You'll tell me what you're worried about, we'll agree on the rules, then we start. Yes? Yes, sir. Your title on paper is personal assistant. The paper is useful for the tax authorities and immaterial otherwise. Your actual job is to be my second set of eyes, my second set of ears, and occasionally my second voice. I'll ask your opinion on things. I will expect a real answer. If you tell me what I want to hear, I'll know, and I'll be quietly disappointed. And quiet disappointment from me is the beginning of a conversation you don't want to have. Do you understand? Yes, sir. You'll read the morning briefings Thomas prepares and summarize the ones I haven't already seen. You'll sit in on meetings at my discretion, and you'll take notes on whatever isn't being said in those meetings, because what isn't said is usually the part that matters. You'll travel with me when I travel, which is roughly 1 week out of every 3. You'll speak for me when I am not in the room but want someone to hear my voice anyway. I'll be careful not to put you in that position more than you can handle, but I will put you there. That's the job. He paused. His eyes hadn't left her face. The other part of the job, Miss Brooks, is this. I run a large number of businesses. Some of them you will find ordinary. Some of them you will find complicated. Some of them you will find at first uncomfortable. I don't ask you to approve of everything you see. I ask you to be discreet about everything you see. If you have questions, you bring them to me. You don't bring them to anybody else. Not to Thomas. Not to Marcus Kane, who you'll meet this afternoon. Not to Serena. Especially not to Serena. Am I being clear? Yes, sir. Good. Now, your turn. Tell me what worries you. She took a breath. She had rehearsed this in the shower on Sunday morning, and on the walk over, and in the elevator. And the rehearsed version had been careful and diplomatic, and she realized now, a lie. He had just told her not to perform for him. She decided to believe him for about 90 seconds and see what happened. 3 things, sir. Go. 1. Your fiancé is going to try to get me fired, or worse, within the first month. I'd like to know whether, if that happens, you will back me or her. You. Without hesitating. Without hesitating. 2. I was a cop. I know what certain kinds of businesses look like. If at any point you ask me to do something that puts me on the wrong side of a line I can't walk back from, I'll say no. I'll say no quietly, and I'll say no in your office with the door closed, but I'll say no. I need you to know that before I start. He was quiet for a second. Acceptable. 3. I have a sister and a mother. My sister has 2 kids. If anything ever happens to them because of something that started in this building, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you regret hiring me. I don't say that as a threat. I say it as information. That was the moment she thought she might have gone too far. She watched his face for the turn, the cooling, the small shift that would mean she'd read him wrong. It didn't come. Instead, he tilted his head very slightly and said, Good. Thomas will give you the addresses of my security teams for all 3 of them by end of day. They won't know they're being watched. The watchers are already in place, Miss Brooks. They've been in place since Saturday morning. That's not meant as a threat either. That's meant as information. Her mouth dried out. Sir, I didn't ask you to. No, you didn't. But the people who would hurt them in order to hurt me don't wait to be asked for permission, and I don't like to lose pieces I've just placed on the board. He pushed off the desk and walked around to his chair, sat down, folded his hands. Is there a 4th worry? There was. There were about 9. She picked the smallest one. What do I call you in front of other people? Mr. Voss. Always. And in front of your fiancé? Something passed over his face. Not a smile. The cousin of a smile. Especially in front of my fiancé. He pressed a button on his desk. Thomas came back in, carrying a glass of cold water on a small tray, and set it down at Lena's elbow. With him came a slim leather folder that he placed in front of Adrian. Adrian slid it across the stone. Your contract. Read it. Don't sign anything you don't understand. If you want a lawyer, I'll pay for one, and I won't use the one I'd recommend. Thomas will take you to your office now. Your first briefing is at 10. You'll meet Marcus at 1. We'll have dinner here tonight, you and me, at 7, because I'd like another hour of your time in a quieter room. Any questions? No, sir. Welcome to the company, Miss Brooks. He was already reaching for another phone and his attention was already somewhere else. And she understood that the audience was over. She stood, picked up the folder, and followed Thomas out. Her office was 3 doors down the hall. It was not what she'd been expecting. Nothing ostentatious, nothing performative. Just a clean, square room with a single window, a modest desk, a chair that turned out, when she sat in it, to be the most comfortable chair she'd ever owned any part of, and a laptop that had already been set up with her name on the lock screen. On the desk sat a small cut-glass bowl of hard candy, lemon drops, and a single white orchid in a clay pot. A post-it note in careful handwriting was stuck to the orchid's pot. Keep it in indirect light. It will live longer than you expect. Tea. She sat down. Her knees gave out a little when she did, and she was glad nobody was there to see it. For about 40 seconds, she just breathed. Then she opened the leather folder and started reading. The contract was 16 pages. It was fair. That was the first thing that unsettled her. She had expected booby traps, non-disclosure clauses that could be used as nooses, arbitration language that shunted every dispute into a private panel Voss-controlled, ownership of her own thoughts and work product extending 5 years past the end of her employment. There were none of those. The non-disclosure was broad but reasonable. The non-compete was limited to 12 months and, crucially, to a single industry. The severance clause was generous. The termination clause was mutual and clean. The only thing that gave her pause was a small paragraph on page 11, written in the same plain language as the rest, which said that in the event of her employer's death, incapacity, or disappearance, she was entitled to an immediate lump sum payment of $1 million, to be wired to an account of her choosing within 72 hours. She read it twice, then a third time. $1 million if he died. She sat back in her chair and looked at the orchid, and she thought very quietly, he has already decided that something bad might happen to him, and he's already decided that the one person in this building who might be willing to tell the truth about it afterward is me. She signed the contract. At 10, Thomas appeared in her doorway with a stack of folders and an apology. He asked me to start you slow. Please forgive him. He set the stack on her desk. It had to be 9 inches tall. These are the last 6 months of board minutes for the 3 most ordinary of his companies: a logistics firm, a wine import business, and a chain of dental clinics. Dental clinics. He likes predictable cash flow. She spent the next 3 hours reading. She took notes in a new spiral notebook Thomas had left for her, plain, cheap, the kind she'd used when she was a rookie, and she found, to her own surprise, that her hands remembered how to do this. The logistics firm had a routing inefficiency on the eastern corridor that nobody had flagged. The wine import business had an invoicing pattern on its Chilean shipments that was either sloppy or, if you squinted, could be the setup for a future audit problem. The dental clinics were boring in the way honest things are boring. She wrote 3 short summaries, the longest of which was 4 sentences, and placed them in a small blue folder Thomas had also left for her. She walked them 2 doors down to his office. He was on the phone, in what sounded like Cantonese, and he waved her in and pointed at a wire basket on the corner of his desk. She set the folder in it, nodded, and left. At 12:58, she was in the conference room next to Adrian's office, a long gray space dominated by a single slab table made, she thought, of the same stone as the desk. At 1 o'clock exactly, Marcus Kane walked in. She had seen him Friday night. She had not, she realized now, really looked at him. At the restaurant, he'd been a man at a table, half-lit, bent over a napkin, murmuring into a phone in Russian. Here, under the cold fluorescence of a working conference room, he was a different animal entirely. He was tall, taller than Adrian, which surprised her, and had the kind of upper body that came from real work, not from a gym. The gray at his temples was the gray of a man who had earned every strand. His suit fit him like he resented it for fitting. Everything about him said, I used to carry heavy things for a living, and I could again, if I had to. He shook her hand. His palm was dry and warm and careful. Miss Brooks, welcome. Thank you, Mr. Kane. Marcus is fine. Mr. Kane is my father, and my father was a union steward on the port of Halden for 41 years, and he would be offended to know you used it on me. She liked him instantly. That was the first thing she didn't trust about him. She had been a cop long enough to know that the people you liked instantly were not always the people you should have. Sit, please, he said, pulling out a chair for her. Adrian asked me to walk you through the people you'll be dealing with most often. The internal team, Who reports to whom? Who can be trusted with what? That kind of thing. He opened a folder. Photographs. Organizational chart. Names. He was a good teacher. That was the second thing she didn't trust. He took her patiently through the inner circle. Thomas Callahan, whom he described with real warmth and not a trace of condescension as the most loyal person in the building and possibly the smartest. Dmitry Pavlos, head of physical security, the shaved-headed man with the broken nose from Friday night. A bear, a good one, don't ever lie to him, he can't stand it. Camille Okafor, chief of staff for the legitimate operations, scary capable, doesn't like men, and she will like you if you are honest with her and never once try to flirt your way out of a deadline. But. And Serena? Lena asked because she needed to see how he said the name. Marcus paused. Miss Vale, he said, choosing the name carefully, is Adrian's fiancée. She is also technically a partner in two of the companies, a residential development fund and an events management holding. She has strong opinions. She does not like change. She did not like the last personal assistant either, and the last personal assistant was a 56-year-old woman with grandchildren. You're telling me it's not personal. I'm telling you she would have hated anyone, but it's going to feel personal. I won't pretend otherwise. Thank you. You're welcome. He closed the folder. He didn't immediately stand up. For a moment he just looked at her, and she had the odd sensation of being weighed by someone who had weighed a great many things over the course of his life. Miss Brooks, may I say one other thing? Please. Adrian is not an easy man to work for. He is also not a bad man. Those two statements can be true at the same time. You'll find out which one is more true over time. When you find out, and I mean the day you find out, the exact day, I want you to come and tell me, not as his subordinate, as mine. She kept her face still. Why? Because I've been with him for 19 years, and in 19 years, the people closest to him have had a pattern. The ones who see him clearly tend to get hurt. The ones who see him unclearly tend to do the hurting. I'd like to keep an eye on which one you become. For your sake. For my sake. For his too. He likes you. He doesn't like many people. I don't want to see either of you broken by this. He stood up. He had the decency not to smile at the end of the sentence. I'll see you at the 4 o'clock. Welcome aboard, Lena. She sat in the conference room alone for a full minute after he left. Her notebook was open in front of her. She wrote one line in it, in her smallest handwriting, and then closed the notebook and folded her arms across the cover. Marcus Kane just asked me to spy on my boss for him on my first day. She did not underline it. She didn't need to. At 4, there was a meeting about a real estate acquisition in a coastal city 3 time zones away. 9 men, 2 women, Lena, Adrian at the head of the table, Marcus at his right hand. Lena took notes. She spoke once when Adrian looked directly at her and asked her opinion about a discrepancy in a contractor's bid that everyone else had moved past. She had read the bid during the briefings. She had noticed the discrepancy and circled it in her notebook 2 hours earlier. The number on page 6, she said, doesn't match the number on page 14 for the same line item. It's either a typo or it's deliberate. If it's a typo, they're careless, and you shouldn't hire careless contractors for a $30 million project. If it's deliberate, they're hoping you won't read to page 14. Nobody spoke. Adrian looked at the bid, then at the contractor's representative on the video screen. Mr. Allred, he said, would you like to explain the discrepancy my assistant just identified? The man on the video screen began to sweat immediately. After the meeting, Camille Okafor, tall, Nigerian, with a steel-gray streak in her otherwise black hair, and the kind of handshake that could probably crack a walnut, stopped by Lena's office with a single sheet of paper, a password for the internal document system. She did not smile. Good catch in the meeting. Don't do it every meeting. They'll stop reading the room and start bringing you worse bids on purpose, just to see if you're paying attention. Got it. And Lena, yes? If you ever need to talk to a woman in this building, I am a woman in this building. Some days that's useful. Most days it's just a fact. Thank you. Camille nodded and walked out, and Lena sat looking at the password on the paper for a long time. Then she pinned it to the corkboard Thomas had mounted next to her desk, right next to the orchid's care note, and she got back to work. At 6:45, Thomas appeared in her doorway with a small cart bearing a linen tablecloth, 2 place settings, and a silver cloche over a serving dish. Dinner in Mr. Voss's office, he said. He asked me to set it there tonight rather than have you meet him in the dining room. He thought you'd prefer it. She had not known she would prefer it. She found, when he said it, that she did. At 7, she walked down the hall. Adrian was at the window again, but this time the lights of the city were on, and the river below had gone black, and the bridges had begun to wear their necklaces of orange lamps. He turned when she came in. "Miss Brooks, sit, please." He had taken off his jacket. His shirt cuffs were rolled up 2 turns. It made him look less like a picture on a magazine cover and more like a man. She wasn't sure whether that was an improvement or a hazard. Thomas had laid out a simple supper on a low table between 2 chairs near the window. Roast chicken, something green, a small loaf of bread, 2 glasses of water, 1 glass of red wine at Adrian's place, and 1 of mineral water at hers. She noticed he hadn't presumed she drank. She noticed he hadn't forgotten her either. "I don't usually eat with my assistants," he said, sitting down across from her. "I'm making an exception because I suspect you've had a very long day, and because Thomas's chicken is better than most restaurants in this city." "Thomas cooks too?" "Thomas does most things well. I try not to think about how he's spending his Sundays." She almost laughed. She took a bite of the chicken instead. It was in fact better than most restaurants in the city. She said so. "I'll tell him. He'll pretend it means nothing to him, and then he'll go home tonight and feel good about it for an hour." They ate for a while without speaking. He didn't fill the silence. She didn't either. It was an odd kind of intimacy, quiet between 2 people who hadn't known each other 72 hours ago, and she found herself unexpectedly comfortable in it, which, the cop part of her noted, was itself a warning sign. After a while, he set his fork down. "Tell me about the captain who buried your case." It was the last thing she'd expected him to say. For a second, the chicken felt like cardboard in her mouth. "Sir? You don't have to answer. I'm curious. I'm not gathering anything against you. There's nothing to gather. I already know most of it." She looked at him. The lamp on the side table threw half his face in warm light and half in shadow. He was waiting, patiently, the way he'd waited at the restaurant for her to pick up the card. "His name was Raymond Nally," she said, slowly. "He'd been in the division 22 years. He had a daughter in college and a son in the Air Force. He was a good cop once. I think he was, anyway. By the time I knew him, he was tired. Somebody had gotten to him by then. I don't know who, I don't know when. I just know that he told me to close a case I shouldn't have closed, and that when I didn't, pictures of my family showed up in my locker. Do you know who took the pictures?" "No. Would you like to?" She put her fork down carefully. "Mr. Voss, if you're about to tell me—" "I'm not telling you anything tonight, Miss Brooks. I'm asking a question. Would you like to know who took those pictures?" The silence between them stretched. "Yes," she said. "Someday. Not tonight." He inclined his head. "Understood." They ate the rest of the meal without touching the subject again. He asked her about books instead, what she'd read recently, what she'd loved. She told him about a novel she'd finished 2 weeks ago, a small quiet book about a widower and a dog, and she watched his face as she talked about it, and she realized, too late, that he had read it. She could see the pages behind his eyes. "You liked it," she said. "I've read it twice. That's not the kind of book I'd have guessed you'd read twice. I contain multitudes, Miss Brooks, so I'm learning." He smiled then. A real one. Small, almost reluctant, a crack in a wall that was otherwise in excellent repair. And in the half-second of that smile she saw, very clearly, a version of this man that might exist in a different life. The one where nobody was ever watching, where the windows didn't have cameras, where a book about a widower and a dog was the most dangerous thing in the room. Then the smile was gone. He glanced at his watch. "It's almost 9. Thomas will drive you home tonight. From tomorrow on you'll have a car of your own, assigned and maintained, with a driver when you want one and no driver when you don't. Please don't argue with me about it." "I wasn't going to." "Good. Before you go, one more thing." He reached into his inside jacket pocket and took out a slim phone, set it on the table between them. "This is your work line. The only people with the number are Thomas, Camille, Dimitri, Marcus, and me. Serena does not have it. Serena will not have it. If she asks you for it, lie to her, smile, and tell me immediately." "Yes, sir." The phone has a button on the side. 3 quick presses in a row sends a signal to Dimitri's team. Use it if you are ever, at any moment, concerned for your safety. They will come in 90 seconds or less from anywhere in this city. 90 seconds. 90 seconds. Don't use it for anything less than that. Don't use it because your apartment's front door sticks. Don't use it because you're nervous. Use it because you need people. I understand. Good night, Miss Brooks. Good night, Mr. Voss. She walked back to her office, collected her coat and her notebook, and followed Thomas down to a waiting black sedan in the underground garage. He held the door for her. She slid into the back seat, and for the entire drive home, she looked out the window and thought about nothing in particular and everything at once. At her building, he opened her door again, walked her to the front steps, and waited until she was inside the glass vestibule with her key in the lock before he touched his knuckle to the brim of an imaginary hat and turned away. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it. That, for some reason, was a small, unreasonable relief. She put the phone Adrian had given her on her kitchen counter next to the old white card, and she stood looking at both of them side by side for a long moment. Her own phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number again. A different string of digits than Wednesday's texter. Day 1. How are we feeling? Her thumb hovered over the screen. She typed back slowly. Who is this? A friend. The one from Wednesday. Same person, different number. I'll keep rotating these. You'll learn to recognize me by the tone. You shouldn't text me, he'll see it. He won't. Not on this line. Trust me on one thing at a time. A pause. Then, did you meet Marcus today? She stared at the screen. Her pulse, which had been normal for most of the day, picked up a little. Yes. He asked you to watch Adrian, didn't he? He asked me to tell him when I'd formed an opinion. Same thing, phrased politely. Lena, listen to me. Marcus is the one you have to worry about, not Serena. Serena is loud, but Serena is the distraction. Marcus has been building something for a long time. He is very, very patient, and he is very, very close. Be careful what you say to him. Don't lie to him outright. He'll smell it. But don't give him anything either. Another pause. Wednesday, 3 p.m., Dalton Park. Please come, I'll explain. She didn't respond. After a minute, the 3 dots appeared and then disappeared, and no more messages came. She made a cup of tea she didn't drink and sat at her kitchen counter in her new cream blouse, with her feet on the lower rung of the stool, and stared at her phone until it went dark. On Tuesday, she learned the names of 38 people in the building and the faces that matched them. She read 2,000 pages of meeting minutes. She ate lunch at her desk with Camille, who told her a very funny story about trying to fire a man who kept showing up to work anyway, and who laughed with her whole face in a way that Lena would not have predicted from their first meeting. On Tuesday afternoon, Serena Vale came to the 43rd floor. Lena heard her before she saw her. A voice down the hall, bright, ringing, the kind of voice that announced a presence on purpose. Then heels on the pale wood floor, and then a pause, and then the light tap of knuckles on her office doorframe. You must be Lana. She looked up from her screen. Serena was wearing navy today, a belted dress and low heels, with her blonde hair pulled back into a knot that was meant to look casual and had probably taken 40 minutes. She was smiling. It was not, Lena noted, the same smile from Friday night. This one was warmer at the mouth and no different at the eyes. Miss Vale. Oh, please, Serena. Serena, may I come in? Of course. Serena stepped in, looked around the small office, spotted the orchid, and made a soft, approving sound. Thomas picked that out. He did one for me when I first started coming around. Mine's still alive 3 years later. He has a gift. She sat down in the single guest chair across from Lena's desk, crossed her ankles, and set her small leather handbag in her lap. Listen, I want to apologize for Friday night. I was in a terrible mood. I'd had a very long day and I took it out on a stranger, which is the worst kind of thing to do to a person. I'm sorry. It was such a well-constructed apology that Lena almost believed it. It's all right. It's not. But thank you for saying so. I wanted to come and introduce myself properly. She paused, and her head tilted a fraction of an inch to the left. Adrian tells me you used to be in law enforcement. I was. That must have been hard work. It had its moments. I imagine it gave you an excellent eye for detail. I try. He relies on that, on detail. He forgives almost anything except being surprised. I thought you might like to know that early. It's the kind of thing the assistants who last learn quickly, and the ones who don't last learn too late. The politeness was a hood over a knife. Lena had worked long enough with interrogation transcripts to recognize the technique. Compliment, information, implied threat, all in one sentence, delivered by a woman who had almost certainly practiced this conversation in front of a mirror the night before. She kept her own face mild. "Thank you, Serena. I'll keep it in mind. I hope we can be friends." "I hope so too." Serena smiled again, stood up, walked to the door, and then stopped as if something had just occurred to her. She turned back. "Lena, one last thing, purely practical. If there's ever anything about Adrian's schedule you find yourself uncertain about, anything that seems irregular, anything that doesn't match what he's told you, I'd be happy to help clarify. As his fiancée, I do tend to know where he is most of the time. It can be a useful second source when you're new." "I appreciate it. Just a thought. Have a wonderful afternoon." She left. The tap of her heels receded down the hall, and after a moment the soft ping of the elevator, and then silence. Lena sat very still at her desk. Then slowly, she reached for her notebook. She opened it to a fresh page, and she wrote in the same small handwriting she'd used yesterday. "Serena Vale just asked me to be her informant on Adrian's schedule on my second day." She closed the notebook. Outside her window, the afternoon light was beginning to go gold at its edges, and the river below the tower was shining in a way that made you want to trust it, which was, of course, the oldest trick water knew. She looked at the orchid. She looked at the small white card still visible in her open bag. She looked at her work phone, dark and quiet on the desk. 3 people had asked her, in less than 48 hours, to quietly betray someone else in this building. The only one who hadn't was Adrian Voss. That, she was certain, was the most dangerous thing about him. She picked up her pen and went back to work. Wednesday came in cold and bright. The sky, the kind of hard blue that only happened in October when the wind had done its job overnight and swept everything soft out of the air. Lena took the subway to work for the first time in 4 days, partly because she wanted to move through the world the way ordinary people moved through it, and partly because she needed time alone inside her own head before sitting down at a desk that didn't feel entirely like hers yet. She got off 2 stops early and walked the last 15 blocks. She passed a diner where she used to eat pancakes on her old salary, a dry cleaner that still had her name on a ticket she'd never picked up, a bodega where the cat in the window had been sleeping in the same spot for 3 years. These were her old streets. She wanted to remind her feet that they still knew her, in case the tower tried to claim them. At 1:45 that afternoon, she stood up from her desk, told Thomas she was taking a long lunch to run a personal errand, and walked out of the building without her work phone. She'd left it in her desk drawer. She was reasonably sure someone would notice. She was reasonably sure she didn't care. Dalton Park was on the far side of the city, a stretch of old elms and gravel paths wrapped around a duck pond that had been there, according to a brass plaque near the gate, since before the Civil War. It wasn't a park for tourists. It was where nannies took toddlers on weekday mornings and where old men played chess on concrete tables, and where, on cold afternoons in October, a woman could meet another woman on a bench without anyone looking twice. Lena got there at 2:50. She walked the perimeter once, slow, the way she'd walked surveillance routes when she was 24, and still thought she could change the world by paying close enough attention to it. She saw nothing that looked wrong. 2 teenagers on a skateboard, a dog walker with 5 leashes in one hand and a coffee in the other, an old man throwing stale bread at ducks that had clearly eaten better lunches. At 2:59, she sat down on the bench nearest the pond. At 3 o'clock exactly, a woman sat down beside her. She was maybe 34, red hair cut short, the kind of cut a person gave themselves in a bathroom mirror and then got used to. A canvas jacket. No makeup. A small freckled face that had once, Lena thought, been open the way children's faces were open and that had learned, at some point, to close itself. The woman didn't look at her. She looked out at the pond. "Don't turn your head," she said. "Just listen." "All right. My name is Joanna Bell. I was an agent with the Bureau, Financial Crimes Liaison. I ran undercover inside one of Voss's legitimate subsidiaries for 14 months between the summer of the year before last and the winter of last year. They pulled me out in December. I have not worked a case since. I'm telling you that so you know I'm not making any of this up, because most of what I'm about to tell you is going to sound like I am." Lena kept her face flat and her eyes on the ducks. "Keep going. You need to understand something up front, Detective Brooks. Most of what you think you know about Adrian Voss is wrong. That's not a compliment to him. That's a fact about him. He is very good at being misunderstood in ways that benefit him. What does that mean? It means he is not the monster people say he is. He is not a saint either. He's the third thing, which is harder to describe and much harder to fight. He's a man who has done a great deal of harm, most of it 2 steps removed from his own hands, and who has spent the last 3 or 4 years trying very carefully to shut down the parts of his operation that cost him the most sleep. Not all of them. The ones that keep the lights on, he protects. The ones he can afford to lose, he's been letting go. Slowly, quietly, without telling anybody. Why slowly? Because if his people knew, some of them would kill him. Lena let that sit for a moment. Keep going. Serena Vale is not his fiancée because he loves her. He proposed to her a year ago because her family controls a bank in a jurisdiction he needs to move money through. It's a business arrangement. She knows it. He knows it. Everyone in that building knows it except, apparently, you. She has been shopping him to other bidders for about 8 months, and not just any bidders. The people she's been talking to are the people Voss has spent 10 years keeping out of this city. Who? A man named Reuven Okafor. No relation to your friend Camille, before you ask. Reuven is a distant cousin. They don't speak. She's clean. Reuven runs an operation out of Lagos in Dubai that would, if he got a foothold here, turn this city into a very different place than it currently is. Voss has kept him out for a decade. Serena has been promising him the keys to the kingdom in exchange for protection, relocation, and a 40% stake in what's left of Voss's empire after the dust settles. Said. That's insane. Adrian would find out. Adrian hasn't because Serena isn't doing it alone. She has Marcus. Lena was still watching the ducks, but her hands on her knees had gone very still. Kane. Marcus Kane. 19 years at Voss's right hand. The man Voss would bleed for, if you asked him yesterday. Marcus has been talking to Reuven for almost 2 years. He met him for the first time in Malta, in a yacht club bar, at Serena's invitation. She introduced them. She's the one who built the bridge. Marcus is the one who's been walking back and forth across it. Why? Money? Fatigue? Grievance? Pick your reason. Take your pick and multiply it by 10,000. Marcus has been second chair for 19 years, and he's getting older, and he's realized, slowly, and then all at once, that being second chair to Adrian Voss is a guarantee you die second too. He wants to be first, and he can't be first as long as Voss is breathing. And Serena has offered him a faster way to the front of the line than waiting. You have proof of this. I have pieces. I don't have the whole thing. I have enough to know I'm right and not enough to put anyone in prison. I came to you because you have what I don't, which is access. Access to the 43rd floor, to Voss himself, to his private calendar, to Marcus's meetings, to Serena's movements. I was inside one of his subsidiaries. I wasn't inside the house. You are. Lena watched a drake rear up in the water, flap its wings twice, and settle again. You texted me before I took the job, she said. You told me not to take it. I had to. Why? Because if you weren't going to take it, I needed to know that fast so I could go find somebody else. And because I needed to know if you were the kind of person who could be scared off. You aren't. That told me everything I needed to know about whether to meet you today. You were testing me. Yes. I don't appreciate that. I don't blame you. Lena took a long breath through her nose. The air smelled like old leaves and duck pond, and the faint coppery edge of weather getting ready to turn. She thought about Adrian Voss at the window of his office, and the phone in his hand, and the way he'd said she'll come to whoever had been on the other end of that call. She thought about Marcus saying, "Come and tell me," not as his subordinate, as mine. She thought about Serena sitting in her guest chair, suggesting brightly that she'd be happy to be a second source on Adrian's schedule. Why should I trust you, she said, and not him? You shouldn't trust either of us. You should confirm what I've told you. You know how to do that. You were good at it once. Be good at it again. How do I find Marcus's meetings with Reuven? He's careful, but nobody's careful all the time. Marcus flies out of a small airfield upstate on a charter service he has used personally for 6 years. The manifest for those flights is kept by a woman named Edna Vickerman, who has run the front desk at that airfield since before Marcus's first trip there. She likes gin, and she doesn't like Marcus, because 14 years ago, he left a dog on one of those planes overnight, and the dog died. and Edna found out and has not forgotten. If you can get to Edna with a bottle of Beefeater and a sympathetic face, you will learn more than I've been able to learn in 2 years. 14 years is a long time to hold a grudge. Edna is a long woman. Despite herself, Lena almost smiled. What else? Serena has a phone she does not use in front of anybody. Not Adrian, not her assistants, not her stylists. She keeps it in a small lockbox in her dressing room in the penthouse. The penthouse has a dressing room attached to the master bedroom. The dressing room has a shoe wall. The lockbox is behind the third row of shoes on the second shelf from the top, in a hinged compartment built into the wall. The code is 6 digits. I don't know the code. I know the box exists because I once spent 2 hours with a woman who cleans the penthouse, who is not on this, who does not know anything, but who mentioned in passing that she'd been told never to move the shoes on that shelf for any reason. How do I get near that phone? You don't, not yet. You get somebody Serena already trusts to get near it for you. That's a later stage problem. What's the early stage problem? Joanna Bell was quiet for a moment. The early stage problem is that Marcus is moving faster than he was when I left. Something shifted in September. I don't know what. He was patient for 2 years and now he isn't anymore. My guess is that Voss has figured out something is wrong but hasn't figured out who. Marcus can feel the wind changing. He's going to move before Voss can. If I had to guess, and this is a guess, I'd say Marcus is 3 months from making his move, maybe less, which means you have less time than I did. Time for what? Time to help Voss figure out what's happening to him before it kills him, and help yourself figure out whether you're going to be standing next to him when it does or across from him. Because one of those two things is going to happen, detective. You're already in the room. You're not getting out clean. Lena kept her face empty. Inside, every organ in her body had woken up and taken a position. She had not felt this particular brand of alive in 2 years. It was not a nice feeling. It was worse than nice. It was familiar. Why are you doing this, Joanna? Because the Bureau pulled me out in December and shelved the case, and when I asked why, my supervisor told me the order came from 2 steps above him and that I should drop it, which means somebody further up the food chain has either been paid or been scared, and either way the official path is closed. And because I spent 14 months watching Voss's people quietly hurt other people, and I've decided I don't get to sleep at night until somebody pays for it. Those are my reasons. You don't have to like them. You just have to believe they're real. Who else knows you're talking to me? No one. Are you alone on this? I have one friend who helps me with the tech. She's not a federal agent and she's not on a government payroll, and she's the most paranoid human being I have ever met in my life, which is why I trust her. I'll tell you her name if and when we need her. That's it. That's the whole operation. And you expect me to? I expect you to do whatever you're going to do. I'm going to walk away from this bench in about 4 minutes, and I'm going to be at this bench every Wednesday at 3 o'clock for as long as it takes. And if you want to come, you come. If you don't, I'll understand, and I'll try another way. I don't own you. I don't even particularly know you. I'm just asking you not to walk into that building tomorrow morning and pretend today didn't happen. Lena looked at her finally. Just for a second, long enough to see what she was looking at. Joanna Bell looked tired in the specific way of people who had given up something important and were still, months later, trying to figure out how to live around the missing space. I'll come next Wednesday, Lena said. Thank you. Joanna. Yes. If any of what you just told me is wrong, I'm going to find out, and I'm going to burn you down. I know. That's part of why I picked you. She stood up. She walked away along the gravel path without looking back, her canvas jacket thin against the wind, and in about 30 seconds she was gone past a stand of yellow-leaved maples, and the curve of the path took her out of sight. Lena sat on the bench for another 10 minutes. She fed the last crumb of a granola bar she'd had in her coat pocket to a duck that came and stood on her shoe and waited politely, and then left when it understood there was no more. She thought about nothing for a little while, on purpose, to let her brain cool. Then she stood up and walked back toward the tower. She took the long way. She walked past a stationery store and bought 2 identical small black notebooks, the same brand and size as the one she'd been using, and a pack of cheap pens. She walked past a second-hand bookshop and stood outside it for a moment, watching her own reflection in the glass and reminding herself of what her own face was supposed to look like when nothing was happening behind it. She was rusty at that. She'd have to get less rusty, quickly. By the time she got back to the 43rd floor, it was almost 5. Thomas was in the hallway with a sheaf of papers under his arm. His eyes flicked to her face, passed, came back. Good errand? Quiet. Ah. He didn't ask. That was another thing she was starting to notice about Thomas Callahan. He almost never asked. He let the silence do the work, which meant that people who wanted to tell him things usually did. She was determined not to be one of those people. At least not today. Her work phone was exactly where she had left it, in the drawer, dark. When she turned it on, there were 3 missed items. A calendar update from Adrian pushing tomorrow's 9 a.m. to 9:30, a message from Camille Okafor asking if she wanted to grab coffee Friday, and a single text from Marcus Kane sent at 2:42 p.m. Thinking of you. Hope lunch was good. She read it twice. 6 words. No question mark. No urgency. A small, precise note to let her know, without saying so, that he had noticed she was out of the building during the part of the day he would not have expected her to be out of the building. She felt something cold run down her back, the way it used to when she was following a man on foot, and realized, a half-beat too late, that he had stopped walking because he was about to turn around. She typed back slowly, "Thanks. Grabbed soup and took a walk. Needed to clear my head. Back now." She set the phone down. She looked at it. A reply came in 30 seconds. Good. Don't let the building swallow you. Some of them stop going outside after month 2, and you can always tell. Noted. Dinner with the client from Oslo tomorrow night. You're coming. Adrian's idea. Wear something warm. We're outside on the terrace for part of it. Yes, sir. Marcus. Marcus. She sat with her hands flat on the desk and her eyes closed for about 30 seconds. Then she opened her eyes, took out one of the new black notebooks she had bought on the way back, and began, in pencil, in very small handwriting, to make a list. She listed every person in the building she had met. She put a small letter next to each name, A for Adrian, a letter she didn't write for the ones she was unsure of yet, a different letter for the ones she thought might be clean. She did not label Marcus. She did not label Serena. She labeled Camille with a small neat C, which stood for check, not for clean. She labeled Thomas with the same. She labeled Dimitri with a C. She labeled herself, in the upper right corner of the page, with a small question mark she did not explain to herself because she already knew what it was asking and didn't feel like answering it in writing yet. Then she closed the notebook, put it in the zippered inner pocket of her bag, behind the lining, where her hand wouldn't brush it by accident, and got back to the stack of papers on her desk, as if she had been doing only that all afternoon. At 6:30, Adrian appeared in her doorway. He did that sometimes. Came unannounced. Didn't knock. Leaned on the doorframe the way a neighbor might, if her neighbor had been the kind of man who collected rare editions of poetry, and who had once, according to a file she had not been supposed to see, personally sat in a warehouse for 3 days, waiting for a rival to walk through the door so he could have a conversation with him, alone, without anyone else's version of it being recorded. Miss Brooks? Mr. Voss, are you free for 30 minutes? Of course. Walk with me. I need to look at something upstairs. I'd like company. She stood up, pulled on her blazer, and followed him down the hall to the elevator. He pressed his thumb to the plate, and they rose 2 more floors to a level she hadn't been to yet. The doors opened onto a glass-walled space that was clearly under construction. Unfinished floors, scaffolding along one wall, the air thick with the particular coal dust smell of a building still becoming itself. I'm turning this floor into a library, he said, walking ahead of her. A real one. Open to the public. No one will know it's mine. The foundation that will run it is 3 legal firewalls away from my name. I wanted you to see it before the walls go up. She looked around. The footprint was immense. A double-height ceiling. A place along the south wall where, from the way the framing was laid out, a reading room with a view of the river was going to sit. Someone had already chalked on the concrete floor, in block capitals, "Children's section here." Why, she said. Why a library? Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. He had his hands in his coat pockets. He was looking at the chalk on the floor. My mother, he said, finally, was a librarian, in a town you've never heard of. She read to me every night until I was 12. She died when I was 14. He did not look at Lena when he said it. I tell you this because, Miss Brooks, I know my reputation. I know what you've read about me. I know what you suspect, and I know what you don't know yet. I also know that there is a version of me that still belongs to the boy whose mother used to read him Treasure Island in a kitchen with bad wiring. That version of me is not a lie. Neither is the other one. A person can be two things. Most of us are. Good. She didn't say anything. I'm not building this as a redemption, he said. I don't believe in redemption. I don't believe anything I do here washes off anything I've done elsewhere. I'm building it because it's something I want to exist in the city I've lived in for most of my life. That's the whole reason. I don't need you to think better of me because of it. I just wanted you to see it. Mr. Voss? Yes. Why are you telling me this tonight? He turned and looked at her. His face, under the hard work lights the contractor had left on, was tired in a way she had not seen it before. Not tired of work. Tired of something else. Something deeper in. Because I think someone in my house is going to try to kill me soon, he said, very calmly. And if they succeed, I would like at least one person who knew me to know that I tried to leave a library behind. The silence in the unfinished room went on for a long time. Do you know who? She said. I have 3 guesses. 2 of them overlap. The third one I don't want to be right about. Why haven't you moved first? Because I am not sure yet. And because if I move against the wrong person, I lose the right one. And because if I move against the right people, and I am wrong about anything, even one thing, I will turn into exactly the man the newspapers say I am, and I will have spent the last 4 years for nothing. He took his hands out of his pockets and looked at them, as if he wasn't sure they belonged to him. I've been trying to walk out of this, Miss Brooks. Slowly, quietly, for years. I thought I was close. I'm finding out that the people closest to me would rather I die than walk. Her throat was tight. She was furious at her throat for being tight. What do you want from me? She said. I told you, eyes and ears. You want me to watch them. I want you to watch everyone, including me. I want you to form your own opinion of what is happening in this company and to tell me, when you have formed it, whether you think I am wrong about what I just said or whether I am right. I don't want your loyalty. Loyalty is cheap and people give it for the wrong reasons. I want your judgment. I will pay for it, and I will defend it, and I will listen to it. And when you tell me it's time, I will decide what to do about it. That's what I want from you. She looked at him across the unfinished floor, at the chalk letters, at the scaffolding, at the reflection of both of them in the dark glass of the empty window wall. All right, she said. All right. But not because I trust you, Mr. Voss, because I trust myself. That's the only right reason, Miss Brooks. They walked back down together without speaking. In the elevator, he stared at the seam of the doors, and she stared at her own shoes. And at the 43rd floor, they stepped out, and he said, "Good night?" And she said, "Good night?" And she went back to her office, and she sat down, and she put her hands over her face, and she pressed her palms into her eyes until she saw small lights. And then she took her hands away and got back to work. She did not go home until a little after 9. Thomas drove her. He noticed, without saying so, that she was quieter than she had been on Monday night, and he very kindly did not attempt to fill the quiet. At her building, she thanked him and went upstairs. She put the new black notebook and a coffee can on the top shelf of her pantry behind a bag of old rice she never cooked. She put her old case notebook, the one with the footnotes, beside it. She made a cup of tea, she did, this time, actually drink. She sat at her kitchen counter in her coat and looked out her kitchen window at the lights of the elevated train going by at the 2:17 timing, which arrived, as it always did, with a rattle of glass and a brief rearranging of the shadows on her kitchen wall. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. You met her. She stared at it. Yes, did she tell you about Marcus? Yes, did she tell you about the airfield? Her pulse kicked. Yes. Don't go there alone. Take somebody you can't fully trust. That sounds like a joke. It isn't. A person you can't fully trust will watch you the whole time and keep you honest. A person you trust will let you get sloppy. Take Dimitri. Dimitri reports to Adrian. That's the point. You want me to tell Adrian. I want you to not pretend you're running a separate operation from him. He's ahead of you already. He's been ahead of all of us. If you want to survive this, you work with him, not around him. You sound like you're changing your story. I sound like I've been watching you all week and deciding what I think. This is the thing I've decided. A pause. Wednesday, same bench. I'll be there. Good night, detective. She set the phone down. She drank the rest of her tea. She looked at her own reflection in the window. In the brief moment the train passed and the dark beyond was a mirror, and she thought her face looked like a face she hadn't seen in a long time. It was not quite a face she liked. But it was, she realized, a face she had missed. She shut the kitchen light off and stood in the dark for a minute. She thought about a man building a library for his dead mother. She thought about another man sending her a note that said, "Thinking of you at 2:42 in the afternoon." She thought about a woman in a cream dress who had asked her, politely, to be a second source. She thought about Joanna Bell walking away under the yellow maples. She thought for a long moment about her sister's kids. The boy playing hockey badly. The girl drawing horses. Then she went to bed. She slept badly again. She didn't mind anymore. She was starting to understand that sleeping badly was what this job cost, and that it was a cheaper price than she'd been afraid it would be. On Thursday, she walked into the tower at 7:51, 9 minutes early, and Thomas met her at the elevator and took her coat, and Adrian's door at the end of the hall was open, and she could hear him on the phone in Italian again. She set her bag down on her desk. She opened her email. She began to answer it. At 9:31, she was in Adrian's office, going through the morning briefings, and when Marcus Kane knocked and came in with a folder under his arm and a warm, uncomplicated smile, she looked up and gave him exactly the same smile back, and she did not see the small bead of approval flicker behind his eyes, because she had already looked back down at her notes. But Adrian saw it. And Adrian, across the room, did not smile. He only marked it, the way a man marks a door he will later have to walk through, whether he wants to or not. The next 6 weeks moved the way weeks move when you are pretending to live an ordinary life inside a building that is quietly deciding whether to kill somebody. They moved fast on the surface and very, very slowly underneath. Lena learned the building. She learned that the copier on the 41st floor jammed if you ran more than 40 pages at a time, and that the woman who ran the 41st floor copier, a grandmother from Puerto Rico named Delia, kept a jar of peppermints in her top drawer that she would give you if you were kind to her and lie to anyone who asked where you were if you needed 30 minutes to disappear. She learned that the security cameras in the south stairwell had a blind spot on the landing between 39 and 40 that lasted about 4 seconds every time the feed refreshed, and that she could, in those 4 seconds, read a folded sheet of paper that she did not want to read anywhere else. She learned that Thomas Callahan drank his coffee with no sugar at 8 a.m. and with 2 sugars at 4 p.m., and that the difference between the 2 cups was the difference between the version of him that ran a household and the version of him that was getting ready to survive the second half of a day. She learned that Adrian Voss ate lunch at his desk every single day, the same thing, a piece of fish, some vegetables, half a lemon, cold water, and that he did not speak to anybody during lunch, not even on the phone, because it was the only 22 minutes of the day he gave himself. She also learned how to lie professionally again. That part came back faster than she'd expected, and it shamed her a little. On a Tuesday morning in the 3rd week, she flew to Zurich with Adrian on a small charter jet that had cream leather seats and a bowl of pears on the table between them. She sat across from him and watched him read contracts for 4 hours without looking up, and when the pilot came on the intercom to tell them they were beginning their descent, he finally set the pages down, looked out at the gray Alps below and said, "Miss Brooks, may I ask you something personal?" "Yes." "Do you still carry the old notebook?" She didn't answer right away. "From your detective work." "I know which one you mean. Do you still carry it?" She looked at him. He hadn't turned his head from the window. "Sometimes." "Good." That was all he said. They landed. They spent 40 hours in Zurich meeting with a series of men in dark overcoats and one woman in a gray one. And Lena took notes. And Lena also for about 40 minutes on the second evening, while Adrian was in a private meeting she was not invited to, went for a walk along the Limmat and took her own notes about a few things she had noticed in the morning's conversations. She noticed that a man named Richter, one of the Swiss bankers in the room, had twice used a phrase about the company's northern exposure that nobody else in the room had used. She noticed that Adrian, who never took notes in a meeting, had picked up a pen the second time Richter said it and had written 2 characters on the corner of his blotter and had then, very slowly, covered them with his palm. She noticed that Marcus Kane, who was on the line by video from New York for that part of the meeting, had gone very still when Richter said it the second time, as if he had been watching for it. She went back to the hotel. She wrote all of it in the coffee can notebook, in pencil. She hid the notebook between the Bible in the nightstand drawer and the drawer itself, in the thin gap where her hand could just slide. She did not trust the hotel's safe. She didn't trust any hotel safe. On the flight home, Adrian slept for 3 hours, and she watched his face while he slept, and told herself it was to see if she could learn anything. She did not learn anything. She did learn with some annoyance that she had started to feel protective of him in his sleep, the way she used to feel protective of her sister's kids when she fell asleep on their couch babysitting, and she did not enjoy noticing that. In the 4th week, at a rooftop dinner for a Norwegian shipping client on the terrace of a different building entirely, the Hollanders Hotel, which Adrian did not own but rented the top floor of 4 times a year. Lena came back from the bathroom and walked around the long curve of a hallway and heard Marcus Kane speaking into a phone in a voice she hadn't heard him use before. Quieter, harder, without any of the warm teacher edges. No, she's not a problem. She's paying attention, but she's not asking the right questions yet. Give it another 4 weeks. I'll know. A pause. Because he's made her the one. If we move now, we move around her. That's harder. Let me do it my way. Another pause. Reuven, listen to me. I said my way. Don't make me say it a 3rd time. He hung up. Lena did not stop walking. She walked past him at normal speed, did not turn her head, did not adjust her pace, and continued back to the terrace, where she sat down beside Adrian, who glanced at her once and did not ask where she had been, because he never did. She picked up her water glass. She took a sip. She set it down. Her hand did not shake, which was the thing she was checking. She looked out across the city and thought, for the first time, not about whether Joanna had been telling the truth, but about what, exactly, she was going to do with the fact that Joanna had been. 2 nights later, at almost 11 at night, she drove an hour and 40 minutes upstate in a car she had rented in a name that was not quite hers, parked half a mile from a small airfield called Grayside Regional, and walked the rest of the way in along a county road with gravel shoulders. She had brought with her a bottle of Beefeater in a plain paper bag, a folder of printouts she had generated from a very careful crawl through a public aviation database, and Dmitri Pavlos, the shaved-headed man with the broken nose, who had driven up separately and met her in the parking lot of a gas station 2 exits away because she had told Adrian, and Adrian had told Dmitri, and Dmitri had said, on the phone to her, in his 4th sentence of the entire conversation, "If you ever run a scene without me again, Miss Brooks, I'll quit, and I'll tell him why." "I understand." "Good. I'll be there at 10:30. Wear boots." Edna Vickerman was 73 years old and ran the Grayside front desk alone every night from 6 to 6. She had gray hair pinned into a knot at the back of her head, a mug that said "World's Okayest Grandma," and a look that said she had seen every bad decision a human being could make at least once. She looked at Lena when Lena walked in. She looked at Dmitri behind her. She looked at the bag in Lena's hand. "That better be gin. It's gin. Beefeater, Beefeater." "Honey," Edna said, "sit down." They talked for 2 hours. Edna did not ask who Lena was or who she worked for. She did not care. She cared and said so twice that Marcus Kane had left a 14-year-old collie named Birdie on one of his planes in July of the year Lena was 8 years old, and that Birdie had been found the next morning in 90-degree heat, and that Marcus Kane had offered to pay for a new dog for the pilot who had been minding Birdie and had called it a clerical mistake. Edna said the words clerical mistake the way other people said murder, and Lena understood that she was sitting across from a woman whose grudge had become a kind of religion, and that she was very lucky the religion had not yet had any worshippers. Edna did not have flight manifests. Edna had something better. Edna had the original handwritten logbook she had kept for the airfield from 1998 to 2019, which she had never turned in when the airfield computerized, because the airfield had never asked for it, and Edna had never offered. The logbook had every charter Marcus had ever taken out of Grayside, every date, every tail number, every passenger who was willing to give a name and everyone who wasn't, every destination, and because Edna had been a woman who liked to know things, every return destination, in case the two weren't the same. Dmitri photographed every page of the last 5 years of logs on his phone while Lena kept Edna's gin glass full. "You're a federal agent, aren't you?" Edna said finally when they were done. "No, ma'am." "You used to be." "No, ma'am, I was a city cop." "Same thing, different shoes. You here to make Marcus hurt." Lena looked at her for a long moment. "I'm here to keep him from hurting somebody else." Edna nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Tell Bertie hello, if you ever see her somehow." "I will." They left at 1:30 in the morning. Dmitri drove her home, which wasn't what she had planned. She had planned to take her rental back. But he had said, without any room for discussion, "I'm dropping the car for you tomorrow." And she had been too tired to argue. In his car, she watched the dark trees go by and held her coat around her and eventually said, "Dmitri." "Yes, Miss Brooks." "How long have you been with him?" 17 years. "And Marcus has been with him 19. "Yes." "Are you loyal to him because you love him or because you're afraid of him?" He considered it for about half a mile. "Both," he said. "For a long time it was both. About 5 years ago it stopped being fear. Not because he got softer, because I got older. At some point you figure out that nobody is going to keep being scared of anybody forever. What stays after that is the part you pick." "What did you pick?" "I picked him." "Why?" "Because he is the only man I have ever worked for who looked me in the face on the second day and asked me the name of my mother and remembered it 3 years later when she died and sent her a wreath. None of the other ones did. That sounds small. It is not small. If you have ever worked for a man who does not ask your mother's name, you will understand." She was quiet for the rest of the drive. She gave the photographs to Adrian at 7:45 the next morning in his office, with the door shut and Thomas holding everyone else on the floor for 20 minutes. She walked him through the logbook page by page on her own laptop, and she watched his face as she did it. He did not interrupt. He did not ask clarifying questions. He looked at every flight Marcus had taken in the last 5 years, and he went very, very still when she came to the ones in the last 14 months, where the destinations were all variations on a theme. Malta. Malta. Larnaca. Malta. Dubai. Malta. A small island off the coast of Sicily she had never heard of. When she finished, he sat for almost a full minute without speaking. Then he said, "Has Joanna Bell been in contact with you?" She froze. Not because she was surprised, because she was not surprised. "Yes." "Since when?" "Since before I took the job." "What does she want?" "She wants Reuven Okafor off her ledger. She says her bosses shut her down. She's running this privately. She's asked me to feed her what I can." "And have you?" "No, not yet." He looked at her. "Why not?" "Because I don't know her well enough." "And you know me." "Not well enough either, but I know you better. I signed a contract with you. I didn't sign one with her." He laughed then. An actual laugh, short and dry and surprised. The first one she had ever heard out of him. "Miss Brooks." "Sir." "Bring her in." "What?" "Bring her in. Next Wednesday. Tell her I know she's been talking to you. Tell her I don't blame her. Tell her I would like her, for the next 6 weeks, to work with us, not around us. Tell her that in exchange, I will give her what I have, including some things she does not yet know about. And in exchange for that, when this is over, I will give her the one thing she actually wants, which is a name from inside her own bureau. She will understand which name. Tell her that exactly. She won't believe me. She'll believe you when you tell her. She will not trust me. That's fine. She doesn't need to trust me. She needs to trust you. You tell her the truth about what I just said, and she'll come. And if she says no, then we don't move on Marcus for another 2 months, because if she keeps running parallel to us, she'll trip a wire we can't predict, and I would rather have her inside the room." Lena took a breath. "Mr. Voss?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me you knew about her?" He looked at her. His face had the quiet tiredness she was beginning to recognize as his most honest expression. "Because I needed to know what you would do with her first. I've had assistants before, Miss Brooks, who were already working for someone else when I hired them. I could not afford to find out that way with you. So I waited. I apologize for that. It was not a nice thing to do to you. I will not do another one like it." She believed him. She was not entirely sure she should have, but she did. On the following Wednesday, Joanna Bell sat down beside her on the bench by the duck pond and listened for 11 minutes without interrupting. At the end of it, she said, "He's going to burn me." "No. Lena, he is. He's going to let me work for 2 months, and he's going to hand me a file, and he's going to walk out of this clean, and I'm going to be holding the file when the marshals come. That's not the deal. The deal is you get Reuven Okafor, and you get the name of whoever in your bureau shut you down, and you get to be the one who brings them both in. He does not need your case. He will not touch your case. Your case is not his case." "What's his case?" "Marcus." "Serena." "Nothing else. He doesn't care about Reuven except that Reuven wants him dead. He doesn't care about your bureau leak except that the leak is how Reuven got close. Everything downstream of those two people is yours. He will sign something that says so. He will sign it tomorrow. He'll sign a piece of paper. He'll sign one that a lawyer you pick writes. He said those words exactly. A lawyer you pick." Joanna looked at the pond for a long time. "Why are you doing this?" she said finally. "Because I watched him for 6 weeks and I think he's telling the truth about wanting out. And because if he is, I would rather help him out than help somebody else kill him. Because I think the somebody else is worse. And because if I'm wrong, I'd rather be wrong with you inside the room than outside it. That's a terrible reason. I know. I'm in. Thank you. I don't forgive him for anything. He didn't ask you to. Good. Tell him I want to meet him in a public place, restaurant, somewhere I pick. I'll tell him. And Lena, yes. If this goes sideways and I end up the one in the wrong room, you come find me. You come find me and you get me out because I got you in. I will." They did not shake hands. They stood up together and walked away in opposite directions. The duck with the bad wing that had been coming to the bench every week stood on Lena's shoe and waited, and she had nothing in her pockets this time, and she felt unreasonably sorry about it, and she knelt down and touched the top of its head with one finger, and it let her, and then it went away. The next 6 weeks were a war nobody could see. Joanna Bell became, inside the building, the name of a new outside consultant retained by Mr. Voss on a confidential tax matter, listed in Thomas's appointment book as JB Consultant Wednesdays. She met Adrian twice in that time, both meetings in a restaurant she picked, and she came out of the second meeting with the faint, shocked look of a person who had discovered that the man she had spent 2 years hating had turned out to be, of all things, real. "I still don't like him," she told Lena, on the bench in the 5th week. "Nobody's asking you to. He offered to pay for my mother's surgery. He found out about it somehow. I said no. Are you going to let him? I haven't decided." Camille Okafor was read-in the 7th week. Adrian brought her into his office on a Friday evening after everyone else had gone home, and he sat across the stone desk from her for almost 2 hours. And when she came out, her face was carefully blank and her hands were steady, and she walked directly to Lena's office and closed the door and sat down in the guest chair and said, all right, you tell me what you need from me. I do it. I don't ask twice. When this is done, you and I are going to have a long lunch somewhere quiet, and I am going to tell you in detail what I think of all of you for leaving me out of this for 2 months. And you are going to sit there and you are going to take it, and then we are going to be fine. Yes. Good. Dmitri quietly replaced 3 guards on Serena's personal detail with men who had been hired and trained in the last 90 days for this particular purpose, and who did not know Marcus Kane's voice well enough to be swayed by it if Marcus Kane ever picked up a phone and said, "Stand down, this is me." Marcus did not notice. Or if he did not show it. Serena started in the 6th week to ask Lena to lunch. She asked politely. She asked with warmth. She asked in the particular way a woman asks another woman when she has already decided that the other woman is either a friend or an obstacle, and she is trying with real effort to arrange the answer to be friend. Lena went. 3 times. She went because Adrian asked her to go, and because she wanted to know the shape of the woman who wanted her boss dead. Serena was, Lena discovered, funny. Surprisingly. Not practiced funny, the way Lena would have expected. Actual funny. She told a long, weird, self-deprecating story at their second lunch about a horse she had once tried to ride in Argentina and failed to ride in a way that had required a paramedic, and Lena had laughed out loud, and then hated herself for laughing, and then laughed again because Serena was laughing at herself, and because for a second, across a plate of hamachi and a glass of mineral water, she had caught a glimpse of the girl Serena had probably been at 23 before she had decided what she was going to trade her face for. At the third lunch, Serena said very lightly, "You know, I used to think Adrian would change. I don't anymore." "No?" "He doesn't. He talks about quitting. He's been talking about it since I met him. Men like Adrian don't quit. They don't know how. What they do is they keep going until somebody stops them, and then they look very surprised and they ask for their mother." "That's a grim way to put it." "I'm a grim woman, Lena. I hide it well, but I'm grim." "What about you?" "What about me? If he doesn't quit, what do you do?" Serena smiled. It was, for the first time, a smile that reached her eyes. It was also, Lena noticed with a cold little shock, the warmest and the cruelest smile she had ever seen on anybody's face. "I survive," Serena said. "It's the only thing I'm actually good at." Lena went back to the office. She wrote down the exchange, word for word. She gave the page to Adrian that night. He read it twice. He handed it back to her. He said, "Put it in the can." "The can? The coffee can on the top shelf of your pantry." She blinked at him. "How do you know about the— You're not the only observant person in this city, Miss Brooks. Put it in the can. I want the chain of custody clean." She put it in the can. The airfield logbook. The text threads Joanna had pulled from a server Reuven Okafor did not know had been pulled. The conversation Lena had overheard on the terrace. 3 different wire transfers Camille had traced through the events management holding Serena co-owned, moving amounts just below reporting thresholds to an account in St. Kitts that Reuven's lawyer had set up in June. A conversation Dimitri had recorded in the back of a black car at Marcus's request, in which Marcus had not said anything incriminating but had asked 3 questions that nobody who was not planning what he was planning would have asked. The file, by the start of the 8th week, was thick. It was also, Adrian told her on a Thursday night, over another quiet supper of Thomas's chicken in his office, not quite enough. Not enough for what? Not enough for what we need. It's enough to fire Marcus. It's enough to have him arrested on 3 state charges that would fall apart at trial. It is not enough to get Reuven Okafor, to get whoever shut Joanna's case down, to dismantle the operation Serena has been building in the offshore accounts, and to walk out of this ourselves without being in handcuffs for things that are already priced into our past and that I have made peace with, but that would, if they hit the newspapers the wrong way, end all of us. We need a final peace, and we're not going to get it by waiting. What do you mean? I mean, we have to make Marcus move. He was going to wait another month. He's patient. Patience is his best weapon. We can't afford his patience. We have to spend it for him. How? We give him a reason to think he has to move now. Adrian. Yes. What's the reason? You. She set her fork down. Explain. He has been watching you for weeks. He has been trying to decide whether you are mine or his or neither. He has been testing you in small ways. You've noticed. Yes. If we give him a moment where he believes for certain that you have turned against me, that you are unstable, that you are disloyal, that I'm about to fire you, or worse, that I'm going to have you disappear, he will move, because in his plan, you are the only unknown left. Remove you, and he has clear road. You want to frame me. I want to let him frame you. He's been building the material for it for a month. I've been watching him build it. If we stop objecting to the material, if we let him place it in front of me, if I react the way a man reacts when his assistant has just stolen from him, he will make his move inside 48 hours. Serena will make hers inside 72. They will overreach. When they overreach, we will have everything. You want me to be the bait? Yes. Say it plainly. I want you to be the bait. The silence in his office was the specific silence of a man asking a woman to trust him in a way that no previous man in her life had trusted her back. What happens to me while he's framing me? On paper, everything bad. You will be accused of stealing financial records and of passing them to a federal agent. Some of that inconveniently will be true in an unusable way. Joanna, obviously. The paper will not know about that part. The paper will show wires, emails, a shell account in your name in a country where I've never been, a timeline that matches a story. The paper will be very convincing. You will have 48 hours to clear your name. 48 hours. That's how I will announce it. Publicly, inside the house. 48 hours to come to me with an explanation, or I act. That gives him a clock. It gives Serena a clock. It gives everyone in this building a clock. Clocks are what make people overreach. While I'm being framed, you will not be alone. Dimitri will be with you. Camille will be with you. Joanna will be with you. Thomas will be with you. You will be the most watched human being in this city for 48 hours. Nothing will happen to you physically. I will stake my life on that. And then you come to me at the end of the 48 with every scrap we've collected, including the scraps they hand us by overreaching, and I confront them. In this room, with the door closed, and then the door opens, and we move. Adrian. Yes. What if Marcus doesn't overreach? What if he plays it patient after all? What if the frame holds? He looked at her for a long moment. Then I tell the truth in public. I clear you. I take the hit. I hand what we have to Joanna's people, and I walk out of this building in handcuffs instead of him. That's the backstop. If we miss the window, you are not the one who pays. I am. You'd do that? Yes. Why? He was quiet for a long time. Because I hired you, Miss Brooks. And I told you I don't like being lied to, and I don't like small lies, and I don't like pretty ones. And if I let a lie be told about you on my watch for my benefit, there would be no point in any of this. There would be no library. There would be no out. There would just be a man sitting in this chair who had finally run out of the last thing he was trying to preserve. I'm not willing to spend that. Not on this. Not on you. She didn't say anything. She couldn't for a moment. Then she said, All right. Let's be bait. Yes. Adrian? Yes. If this works, I'm going to need a very long vacation. If this works, Miss Brooks, I will buy you an island. I don't want an island. Then I will give you the money I would have spent on the island, and you can do with it what you like. That sounds better. I thought it might. On the following Monday morning at 9:14 a.m., Adrian Voss walked into the conference room next to his office, where Marcus Kane and Camille Okafor and Dmitry Pavlos and 6 other senior people had already gathered for the weekly operations meeting, and he set a thick folder down on the stone table, and he said, in a voice that was very calm and very cold, Before we begin, I have been informed this morning of a substantial irregularity involving my personal assistant. I will not discuss the specifics of what has been found in this room. I will tell you only that Miss Brooks has 48 hours from this moment to come to me with a full explanation. At the end of 48 hours, if her explanation does not satisfy me, I will act accordingly. Until then, she is on administrative suspension. She will not be in the building. She will not have access to any system. I would ask that no one in this room, without exception, contact her, meet with her, or speak to her by any means until this is resolved. Am I understood? Nobody spoke. He looked at Marcus Kane for exactly 1 second longer than he looked at anybody else. It was not a hard look. It was almost regretful. It was exactly the look a tired man gives a brother he is about to begin the long process of losing. Thank you, Adrian said. Let's continue with the agenda. Marcus's face did not change. His hand on the table did not move, but very quietly, under the edge of the slab, where only Dmitri, who had been told where to look, could see it, his thumb pressed against the inside of his own index finger, once, twice, 3 times. A tell. A small one. The kind of tell a man makes when a clock he did not know he was waiting for has just started running. Downstairs on the street, 2 blocks from the tower, Lena Brooks stood on the corner in a coat she had worn for 2 winters and a hat she had pulled low over her eyes, and she watched Thomas Callahan come out through the revolving doors carrying a small duffel bag that contained her laptop, her work phone, a burner phone Dmitri had given her that morning, and 1 sealed envelope she was not supposed to open until Wednesday night. Thomas walked up to her, held out the duffel, and did not smile. 48 hours, Miss Brooks. 48 hours? Don't go home tonight. Don't go to any place you've used before. Don't call any number that knows you. The car at the end of this block is yours. The driver is yours. The apartment he's taking you to is yours. There's a second phone in the glove box. Dmitri will call it at 9 sharp. Thomas. Yes. He said he'd take the hit if this goes wrong. Thomas looked at her for a moment with a face she hadn't seen him wear before. A face that had been a young man's face once, in a country that wasn't this one, and that had learned over decades to keep almost nothing visible. "He will, Miss Brooks." "Do you believe him?" "I've believed him for 28 years. I'm not going to stop today." He turned and walked back toward the tower. She stood on the corner for another half-second, looking up at the top of the building, at the window 43 floors up where she knew, at this exact moment, a man was sitting at a stone desk pretending to be a different man than he was. Pretending, in fact, for her. She pulled her hat lower. She turned. She walked to the car at the end of the block. She got in. The clock had started. The car was a dark gray sedan with tinted windows and a driver who did not introduce himself. He didn't have to. Lena had seen him twice before in the tower garage, and she knew from Dmitri that his name was Henrik and that he had been driving people out of dangerous weather since before she'd graduated high school. He pulled out of the curb the second her door shut, and he did not speak for the first 20 minutes. The apartment was on the 11th floor of a gray brick building in a neighborhood Lena had never worked a case in. No doorman. A freight entrance around the side. A key under a loose tile in the stairwell that Henrik watched her pick up without saying anything, so she would know she'd done it right. The apartment itself was one bedroom, furnished, plain, a couch, a small table, a bed with a gray comforter, a fridge that had been stocked that morning with eggs and bread and 3 kinds of fruit by somebody Lena would never meet. On the table was a manila folder, a new laptop, and a handwritten note in Thomas Callahan's careful script. "Don't answer the door for anyone you haven't texted first. The window in the bedroom goes to a fire escape that goes to a courtyard that goes to a back alley that goes to the next street over. If you have to leave without a car, that's the way. T." She read it twice. She folded it. She put it in her coat pocket because she wasn't going to leave a note in Thomas's handwriting lying on a table. At 9 sharp, her burner phone rang. Dmitri. His voice was flat and efficient and, underneath, a little careful, the way a man's voice gets careful when he has decided he is going to feel something later, but not now. "Miss Brooks." "Dmitri." "Are you inside?" "Yes." "Windows." "Closed. Blinds down." "Phone." "In my hand." "Good. Here's where we are." At 9:14, he announced it. At 9:22, Marcus excused himself from the operations meeting and went to his office and closed the door. At 9:26, he made a phone call on a line we're monitoring. The line is to a number in the Cayman Islands. The conversation lasted 140 seconds. He did not say anything actionable. He asked, and I quote, "How soon can the Mediterranean partner be in the building?" The answer was 40 hours. Marcus said, "Make it 32. Then he hung up. Reuven is flying in tonight. He'll be on the ground by 6 a.m. He's meeting Marcus at an office in the Harlow district at 9 tomorrow morning. We will have a man in the next office. We will have audio. You don't need to think about that part. That part is done." Serena left the penthouse at 9:52. She is at her stylist right now. She has scheduled 3 appointments this afternoon that don't exist. The appointments are cover for 3 meetings in 3 different hotels in a 20-block radius. She's meeting a lawyer, an account manager, and a woman who handles passport work for people with money. We have eyes on all 3. We will have eyes on her the whole time. Has she called Marcus? Not yet. She will. She's waiting to see if he calls first. She always waits. It's the one place her pride still lives. Dmitri? Yes. What about me? You are off the map. Nobody knows where you are. Nobody will know. You will sit in that apartment for 48 hours with that laptop, and you will go through the file Thomas gave you in the duffel, and you will make a list of every hole we still have, and you will send that list to me by the burner at 6 a.m. tomorrow. You will not answer your work phone. You will not answer your regular phone. You will not call your sister. You will not call your mother's facility. You will not call your landlord. If any of them need anything in the next 48 hours, Thomas is handling it personally. He has cash. He has stories. He is the best liar I know. He will not let anything bad happen to them. Thank you, Miss Brooks. Yes. He asked me to tell you one more thing. Go. He said, tell her I am not going to explain this to her again until it's done, and tell her I meant everything I said in the office about what happens if we miss. Then he went back into the meeting. I'm repeating the words because I memorized them. That's all I can do. Thank you, Dmitri. Go through the file. He hung up. She stood in the middle of the furnished apartment with the phone in her hand and her coat still on. For about 15 seconds, her chest felt like somebody had put a small stone on it. Then she put the phone on the table, took off her coat, hung it on the back of a chair, and she went through the file. She went through it for 11 hours. She stopped twice to eat an apple and once to stare at the ceiling. She filled 3 pages of the new black notebook and crossed out half of it and started again on a 4th page. By 8 that night, she had what Adrian had asked for. A list of every hole in their case that they still needed to fill, ranked by how urgent it was, annotated with which of them could fill which hole and how fast. At 8:30, her burner buzzed. Not Dimitri this time. A number she didn't know. Open the envelope. A. The sealed envelope. Thomas had put in her duffel was plain white, thick, unmarked. She slid it open with a kitchen knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds in his handwriting. Miss Brooks. If you're reading this, it is the night of the first day. I'm writing this on Sunday. I'm writing it because I wanted to say something to you that I didn't want to say in the office, because the office is not a place where I let myself say things. If this works, I will burn this letter when you bring it back to me on Wednesday, and we will not discuss it. If it does not work, you will still have it, and you can do what you like with it. Here's what I wanted to say. I know what I am asking of you. I know what it costs to be the bait. I know that nothing I have said or done in the last 8 weeks has earned the trust I'm asking you to give me tonight. I am asking for it anyway. I am asking because I do not have a better plan, and I am asking because you are, right now, the only person in my life who has not agreed to help me for a reason I can buy. If we come out of this, all of us, you and me and Joanna and Camille and Dimitri and Thomas and everyone who has put a hand in, I will keep every promise I made you. I will dismantle what's left. I will disappear. I will not ask you to come with me. I will not ask you for anything. You owe me nothing, Miss Brooks. You never have. You owe me nothing whether we win this or whether we lose it. One last thing. When my mother was dying, at the end, she asked me what I was going to do with my life. I was 14 years old, and I told her I was going to be a good man. She laughed. Not cruelly. She laughed, and she said, Adrian, that is a very hard thing to be, and a lot of people say it at 14, and almost nobody manages it. Try for something smaller. Try to be a man who tells the truth about himself. I have not been that man. I have told the truth about a lot of things, and I have lied about the rest, and I have told myself the lies were necessary for long enough that I stopped noticing them. You have made me notice them. That is the reason for all of this. That is the only reason. I did not hire you because I needed an assistant. I hired you because you looked at me in that private room the way my mother used to look at me when she was about to tell me I had done something wrong. I wanted that look in the building every day. It is not a comfortable thing to want. It has not been comfortable to have. It has been, I think, the best thing to happen to me in 20 years. Go to sleep. Eat something. I will see you on Wednesday night. A. She read it twice. She did not cry. She sat at the little table in the furnished apartment with a letter in her hand and her face very still, and she thought about a 14-year-old boy in a kitchen with bad wiring, and she thought about her own mother in the care facility in Ridgefield County, and she thought about how the worst part of all of this, the part she had not expected, was that she was going to miss him if he won, because if he won, he was going to disappear. And if he lost, he was going to be gone another way. She folded the letter back into the envelope. She put the envelope inside the new black notebook. She put the notebook inside her coat, in the inner pocket, against her ribs. She ate a piece of bread with butter. She went to bed. She did not sleep well. She did not sleep badly either. She slept like a woman who had a job to finish in the morning. Tuesday morning at 6, she sent Dimitri the list. Tuesday morning at 6:14, Dimitri sent back 3 words. On it, thanks. Tuesday morning at 9:02, Reuven Okafor walked into the 11th floor office of a man who thought he was his business partner and met Marcus Kane for what Marcus believed was a private conversation. Tuesday morning at 9:03, the audio feed in the next office went live to a laptop in Dimitri's car and a second laptop in the basement of a federal building downtown, where a woman Joanna Bell had been quietly talking to for 6 weeks was listening with her hand cupped over her mouth. Marcus said, in that conversation, and it was later typed and later read aloud in court, that Adrian Voss would be handled by Thursday. He said the word handled without dressing it up. He said Lena Brooks would be the reason, meaning the cover story, the scandal, the piece of Voss's own life that would make his death make sense on a front page. He said Serena Vale was on the money side, meaning she was already moving the funds. He said there were 7 people inside who will pivot the moment Voss was gone, and he named all 7. 2 of those 7 were in the conference room when Adrian had made the announcement about Lena. 4 of the others were people Lena had met. The 7th was a man she had not met, a lawyer in Geneva whose name she would learn later, and whose face she would recognize from a photograph on a small Alpine newspaper's website. Reuven Okafor said very little. Reuven Okafor was a patient man who had not gotten rich by talking. He said at the end only, "I want her out of the building by Thursday morning, permanently, I don't care how." Marcus said, "She'll be gone by tonight." The recording was very clear. The recording was also, to the people listening downtown, the end of a 2-year case that they had not been allowed to work. Tuesday afternoon, Serena Vale sat in a hotel room with a woman who made passports and discussed, in specific detail, a new identity for herself, her mother, and a small black poodle. She gave the woman an envelope of cash. The woman counted it. The woman was a federal agent named Patricia Lynn, who had been placed into that particular line of work in that particular hotel 3 weeks earlier by Joanna Bell's very paranoid friend, who had, it turned out, not been entirely a civilian after all. Tuesday evening, Lena sat in the furnished apartment and went through the last of the file, and at 7:30 Dmitri called her and said simply, "We have everything." "Say it." "We have it. All of it. Recordings, wires, passport buy, the 7 names, the Geneva lawyer, the bank in St. Kitts, the number Reuven was wiring through, the lieutenant inside the bureau who shut down Joanna's case. We have it. If we walked in with this tonight, it would stick. It would stick forever. Joanna's people are ready. They're waiting on Adrian's signal." "What's the signal?" You. You come back. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. The tower. You walk in the front door. You go up. You go into his office. He confronts them. They talk. They incriminate themselves on top of what we already have, which is the part he wants for the record. Him hearing it, them saying it to his face. When he has what he needs, he taps his pen on the desk twice. That's the signal. Federal agents come through the doors. It's done. Dmitri. Yes. Why does he want to hear it from them? There was a long silence. Because he has to, Miss Brooks. Because if he doesn't, he'll spend the rest of his life wondering whether he was wrong about people he loved. He can't afford to wonder. He has to know. All right? 7 p.m. tomorrow. Get some sleep. I'll send Henrik at 6:30. Dmitri. Yes. Thank you. Miss Brooks. Yes. Don't thank me until it's done. Wednesday morning, she slept until 8. She had not slept until 8 in 2 years. She woke up and for a minute she didn't know where she was. And then she did. And her stomach turned over once, and she got up. She spent the day carefully. She ate a real breakfast. She showered. She sat at the small table and wrote in her coffee can notebook for 3 hours, longhand, everything she could remember about every meeting she had been in for 8 weeks. She was writing it down, she realized halfway through, because if something went wrong tonight, she wanted the record to exist in her own handwriting, on paper, in a cheap notebook, in a pantry, so that somewhere in the world there would be a version of the truth that no lawyer could get to. She was being, she realized, a cop again. She had missed being a cop. She would not miss being a cop this exact way. At 6:30, Henrik arrived. She put on her coat. She put the notebook in the inner pocket against her ribs, next to Adrian's letter. She walked down to the car. At 6:52, they pulled up in front of 1200 Dumont Plaza. The lights of the tower were on, as they were every night, and from the sidewalk she could see, very high up, the yellow rectangle of his office window. She stood for a moment on the curb looking up, and she let herself, for about 3 seconds, feel afraid. Then she walked in. The lobby guards did not pretend to have forgotten her. The shorter one, the one who had greeted her on Monday morning 8 weeks ago, looked at her and nodded once, minutely. She nodded back. She put her thumb on the reader. She got in the elevator. The 43rd floor was quiet. Thomas was not in the hallway. No one was. That was deliberate. Adrian had emptied the floor. The double doors of his office were open. He was sitting behind the stone desk. Marcus Kane was in one of the 2 chairs across from him. Serena Vale was in the other. Neither of them turned when she came in, which was also deliberate, because he had told them she was coming. Miss Brooks, Adrian said quietly, please close the door. She closed the door. She walked to the side of the desk, not behind it, and she stood there with her hands folded in front of her. It was the same posture she had stood in 8 weeks ago in the private room at Ember and Oak. She knew she was doing it on purpose. So did he. Serena looked at her without expression. Marcus looked at her with something that was almost regret. Adrian, Marcus said. His voice was very calm. Before you say whatever you're going to say, I want to speak first. Speak. What I'm about to tell you is something I should have told you 5 years ago. I have been working against you for the better part of 2 years. I have been talking to Reuven Okafor. Serena and I have been moving money. We have been planning specifically to remove you by the end of this week. Yesterday morning, we agreed on Thursday. Today, I am going to walk away from all of it. I am going to sit in front of you in this chair, and I am going to ask you to forgive me, and I am going to ask you to let me help you clean up the mess I made. I am doing this because the operation has become unstable, and because if we go forward, we lose. And if we lose, you die. And I find, to my own surprise, that I am not willing to be the reason you die. The office was very quiet. Adrian looked at him for a long time. Marcus? Yes. When did you decide? This morning. At 9:05. When Reuven looked at me across the table and asked me how soon we could kill you, and answered the question for himself before I could answer it, and I realized he was not a partner. He was an owner. I had sold you to somebody who was going to own me the moment you were gone. I spent 23 years being owned by a father I hated, Adrian. I am not going to spend the last 20 being owned by a man I don't even respect. I would rather go to prison. You will go to prison. I know. For a long time. I know. And you're telling me this now. I'm telling you now because if I tell you now, maybe Serena gets a chance. If I tell you later, she doesn't. Serena made a small sound, almost a laugh. Oh, Marcus, she said softly, don't. Serena, don't do this for me. You don't owe me anything. Let me talk. I'm the one who started it. You were the knife. I was the hand. Adrian knows that already. He's always known that. Adrian didn't answer. Serena turned her head and looked at him. There was nothing in her face that Lena had seen in the restaurant 8 weeks ago. No cream-dress cruelty, no polite lunchtime warmth. What was in her face now was, for the first time, just a woman who had been a girl once, and who had made a long series of choices she could not now unchoose. Her eyes were very dry. Her hands on the arms of the chair were steady. I am tired, Adrian, she said. I have been tired for 11 years. I was 24 when I met you. You were 31. You were already this. I told myself I could stand it. I told myself I could love a man who was this. I could not. I have not. I have instead been a woman who stood next to a man she did not love and watched a life go by that was not hers. I do not ask you to be sorry for me. I am the one who stayed. I stayed because the money was good, and because leaving was frightening, and because at some point not leaving becomes a decision you have to defend, and the only way to defend it is to hate the person you stayed next to. I am very good at hating you, Adrian. I have made a career of it. I want to tell you that tonight because I will not get another chance, and because after 11 years I owe you the truth about at least one thing. Adrian did not speak. Serena looked at Lena. And you, she said, not angry, just looking. I am sorry about the restaurant. I am sorry about the lunches. I am sorry that I almost liked you. I liked you in spite of myself. You reminded me of a woman I used to be. That made me cruel to you. I am not going to pretend otherwise. Thank you, Lena said. She wasn't sure she meant it. She said it anyway. It was, she thought, the right word for the moment. Adrian looked down at the stone desk for a long moment. Then he said, Marcus, tell me the names. Which names? The 7. Marcus took a breath. And then, in a very flat, very deliberate voice, he said them. All 7. He said the lawyer in Geneva. He said the 2 people who had been in the operations meeting on Monday. He said the 4 others. He did not hesitate, and he did not soften them. Every name landed on the desk like a small stone dropped onto a pond from a height. When he was done, Adrian picked up a pen from the desk. He turned it over in his fingers. He looked at it. He tapped it twice on the stone. The doors behind Lena opened. Federal agents came through in dark windbreakers with white letters on the back. They did not shout. They did not draw weapons. They did not need to. Joanna Bell was the second one through the door. Her hair was tied back. She was wearing a small silver badge at her hip that Lena had never seen her wear before. Her face was very calm. "Mr. Kane," Joanna said. "Ms. Vale, you are under arrest. The specifics are in the warrant. Please stand up slowly. Keep your hands where we can see them." Marcus stood up. He put his hands behind his back without being asked. He looked at Adrian one more time. "Adrian?" "Yes." "I loved you. I want you to know that. Whatever else this is, that part was real." "I know, Marcus." "Do you?" "I know." Marcus nodded once. The agent behind him cuffed him. He did not resist. Serena stood up next. She smoothed her skirt down her thighs. The gesture was so absurdly ordinary that Lena felt something crack in her chest, a small hairline fracture, at how even in that moment Serena was still trying, in whatever small way she could, to look like herself. Joanna cuffed her gently. Serena did not look at Adrian again. She did not look at Lena. She looked at the floor. They were led out of the office. The agents followed them. Joanna stayed behind for a moment. She looked at Lena. She looked at Adrian. She did not smile, but something in her face moved that had been locked for 2 years. "We'll pick up the other 7 tonight. Reuven's already in custody. He went down at the airport an hour ago. The bureau lieutenant is going down in Washington in about 20 minutes, on a street corner, on camera, by people he hasn't seen in a long time. It's over. All of it. It's done." "Thank you, Joanna," Adrian said. "Don't thank me, Mr. Voss. You still have to answer for your own half. You and I both know what that's going to look like." "I know. Lena will tell you the timeline. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. downtown. You know the address." "I'll be there." She nodded once. She went out. The doors closed softly behind her. The office was quiet. The stone desk was covered in the pen Adrian had tapped, the folder Marcus had set down, Serena's handbag, which she had left on the chair. The lights of the city were still burning outside the tall window. Adrian stood up slowly, as if his knees hurt. He walked to the window. He put his hands in his pockets. He looked out at the river. Lena didn't move. "Miss Brooks?" "Yes?" "You can go home tonight." "I can." "Will you?" "Yes." "Good." He didn't turn around. "I am going downtown in the morning. I will tell Joanna's people the truth about a great many things. I will make arrangements. I will not ask you to testify to any of it. You will not be involved in that part. You are out of it now." "Adrian?" "Yes." "What happens to you?" He was quiet for a long time. A reduced sentence, probably. Some time. Not as much as Marcus. Not as much as Serena. The library goes forward. The foundation takes over the companies that are clean. The ones that aren't dissolve. My lawyers will handle it. It will take about a year. A year of you in prison. About that. Possibly less if the cooperation agreement goes the way my lawyers think it will. It's the part of this I couldn't spare myself. I don't want to spare myself. And after, he turned around. After, Miss Brooks, I don't know. That's the honest answer. After, I think I become a man nobody knows. In a town nobody has heard of, doing something small. That's what I want. I don't know if I'll get it. I'm going to try. Adrian. Yes. I'm not going to come see you in prison. I wouldn't want you to. I'm not going to write. I wouldn't want you to. I'm going to go back to being a person nobody has heard of in a city where my sister's kids still have homework. Good. And in a year, don't promise me anything, he said. Don't, please. I have had enough promises for one lifetime, including the ones I've made. Go home. Live. If in a year you find yourself curious, you'll find me. You're a detective, Miss Brooks. You always were. That hasn't stopped being true, whatever else has. She looked at him. She walked to the desk. She took the envelope out of her coat pocket, the letter he had written her on Sunday, and she laid it on the stone. You said you'd burn this if we made it. I did. Then burn it. He looked at the envelope. He looked at her. Later, he said. Tonight I'd like to keep it for a few hours. All right. Miss Brooks. Yes. Thank you. You're welcome. She walked out of the office. She did not look back. She walked down the corridor of closed doors. She pressed her thumb to the reader in the elevator. She rode down 43 floors in silence. She crossed the black marble lobby. She walked out the revolving doors into the cold October night, and she stood on the sidewalk for a minute looking up at the building, and then she did not look up again. She went home. She slept for 11 hours. The city, in the months that followed, forgot the story faster than Lena had expected. There was a small flurry of headlines, a few hungry weeks of reporting, photographs of Adrian Voss in a dark suit walking up the steps of a federal courthouse, a photograph of Serena Vale in a beige prison coverall that Serena would have hated and that Lena felt, against her will, a brief and complicated sadness about. The 7 names Marcus had said in the office all landed in their own small ways. Reuven Okafor was extradited. The bureau lieutenant resigned before he could be fired, and then was arrested anyway. The lawyer in Geneva was arrested in a restaurant while he was eating a plate of veal. The empire did not collapse overnight, despite what Joanna's friend later called it in a podcast interview. It collapsed the way real things collapse, messily, in pieces, over months, with lawyers and accountants and a great many small-town judges who had never dreamed their careers would include a signature like Adrian Voss's on an affidavit. By the end of the following spring, most of what had been his was somebody else's, or nobody's, or, in the case of the library, on track to become the thing it had been intended to become. An actual library, in an actual building, with actual children's books in a children's section on the south wall. Lena did not go to the ribbon cutting. She had gone back to work, after 3 weeks of not going to work, as a private investigator, in a small office over a dry cleaner on Grove Street with her name on the frosted glass door in black letters. She took cases she could live with. She turned down cases she couldn't. She paid Mr. Prashad 8 months of rent in advance the first week she had the money. And Mr. Prashad cried a little and did not try to hide it, and she did not tease him for it, because at 47 she had learned, among other things, that some people cry because they have been carrying something for a long time and have finally been allowed to set it down. Her mother in Ridgefield County did not get better. Her sister's kids kept drawing horses and playing hockey. Thomas Callahan retired to a small town by a lake and sent her a Christmas card with a photograph of a dog on it that Lena chose, without confirmation, to believe was named Birdie. Adrian served 14 months in a minimum security facility in the northern part of the state. He did not write to her. She did not write to him. That was the arrangement. She had meant it when she'd said it, and he had meant it when he'd accepted it, and they both, in their separate quiet places, kept the bargain. 14 months became 15. 15 became 18. On a clear morning in early spring, in a town called Rowan Bay, which was 4 hours north of the city and sat on a stretch of ocean that people went to in order to stop doing whatever they had previously been doing, Lena Brooks parked a small green car at the end of a gravel driveway and got out. The house at the end of the driveway was small and gray and had a porch with 2 chairs on it and a view of the water. There was no mailbox with a name on it. There were no lights on at 10 in the morning because the windows were open and the sun was doing the work. There was a man on the porch in a blue flannel shirt, drinking coffee from a white mug, and he did not look up when she closed her car door because he had not yet decided to believe she was there. She walked up the gravel slowly. Her boots made the sound that boots make on gravel. She stopped at the foot of the porch steps. He set the mug down. He looked up. He was thinner than she remembered. His hair was almost entirely silver at the temples now, the way hair goes when a man has finally let it. He was not wearing a watch. He was not wearing anything that looked expensive. He looked, for the first time since she had met him, like a man who was only one man. "Miss Brooks? Mr. Voss." He almost smiled. "Adrian, I think, at this point." "Adrian? Would you like some coffee?" "Yes." He stood up. He went inside. She did not follow. She sat down in the empty chair on the porch and looked out at the water. It was blue, and it was doing what water does, which is to say it was moving without meaning anything by it. A gull went by overhead and said something unkind about the morning and kept going. He came back out with the second mug. He handed it to her. He sat down. They did not speak for a while. "You found me," he said finally. "I'm a detective." "Yes." "You didn't make it very hard." "No." "Adrian." "Yes?" "I'm not here for anything." "I know. I just wanted to see." "To see what?" She thought about it. She drank a sip of the coffee. It was not very good coffee. That, somehow, was a relief. I wanted to see whether you were a man who sat on a porch, she said, or whether you were still a man who built empires and pretended he was sitting on a porch. He didn't answer for a long moment. I was the second one, the first 6 months, he said. I won't lie about it. I was pretending. I kept looking for the next move. There wasn't one. It took me a while to believe there wasn't one. Then I started actually sitting on the porch. I started reading books again. I started cooking, badly. I burned a lot of things. I have gotten better. I am still, by most people's standards, a bad cook. Is that what you do now? Cook. I teach a seminar at a community college 2 towns over. Business ethics. They don't know who I am. The dean knows. Nobody else. I get paid almost nothing. The students are mostly 20 years old. They argue with me. It is the best thing I have ever done. Business ethics. I know. That's funny, Adrian. It is intended to be funny. It is also serious. I find, at this point in my life, that most of the things I actually believe are both. She laughed, quietly. Just a breath of it. They sat for another long time. Lena. Yes. It was the first time he had said her first name. She noticed. She didn't look over. Are you well? I'm well. Are you working? Yes. What kind of work? I find people who don't want to be found. Sometimes I find things that don't want to be found. It's quiet. I like it. Do you live alone? Yes. Do you want to? She thought about that one. Most of the time. And the rest of the time. The rest of the time, I don't know what I want. That's honest. I've been practicing. He nodded. He did not push. That was one of the things about him she had remembered, and one of the things she had needed to check had not been a trick. It hadn't been. He was still, in this smaller version of himself, a man who did not push. The tide was going out. The gulls were over the breakwater. Somewhere far down the road, a lawnmower started up and kept going. It was an ordinary morning in an ordinary town, and the man beside her had once, 3 years before, sat in a chair in a half-dark private room and said Serena in a voice that had made a whole table of rich men sit down. And now he was sitting in a blue flannel shirt drinking bad coffee on a porch. And both things were true, and neither one canceled out the other. And she thought, for the first time in a long time, about something her mother had said to her once, a long time ago, before the care facility. And before the care facility, before the care facility. Her mother had said, the point of a life, Lena, is not to be perfect. The point of a life is to tell the truth about yourself, out loud, at least once, to at least one other person before you die. That's all. That's the whole thing. Everybody who does that gets to rest a little at the end, and everybody who doesn't, doesn't. She hadn't understood it at the time. She had been 18. She had rolled her eyes. She understood it now. She understood, sitting on a porch next to a man who had told the truth about himself to a room full of federal agents and paid for it with 14 months of his life, and who was now, in the third spring after all of it, teaching 20-year-olds that the thing he had done was, at minimum, not the way to do it. She understood that the point wasn't that he had been good. The point was that, at the end, he had been honest. That was rarer than goodness. That was harder. That was the one thing most people, most of her cases, most of her captains, most of her own moments of fear, never managed at all. It didn't mean forgiveness. It didn't mean the dead people he hadn't killed himself but had let happen were unkilled. It didn't mean Serena, who was still in a facility upstate and who would be for a while, was anything other than what she had been. It didn't mean Marcus, who was in a harder facility and would be for much longer, was to be pitied more than the people he had been willing to trade Adrian to. It meant only that somewhere between the woman who had refused to say, I am not a person in a private room 3 years ago, and the woman who was now drinking bad coffee on a porch in Rowan Bay, a choice had been made, hers, not his, that she wanted the rest of her life to be lived out loud, that she was done bowing, that whatever came next, she was going to walk into it with her own face on. Adrian? Yes. I came up here because I wanted to know if you were real. Am I? You're closer than you were. That's all I can offer. That's enough for today. Will you come back? I don't know. All right. If I do, I'll call first. All right. If I don't, if you don't, he said, I will sit on this porch, and I will drink my bad coffee, and I will teach my seminar, and I will not, for any reason, for the rest of my life, go looking for you. That is my side of the bargain. It has been my side of the bargain since the day I signed your contract. It will be my side of the bargain tomorrow. Thank you. You're welcome, Lena. She finished her coffee. She set the mug down on the porch rail. She stood up. He stood up with her. They did not touch. They did not even shake hands. That, too, felt correct. She walked back down the gravel. She got in her car. She sat for a minute with her hands on the wheel and her eyes closed and the salt air coming in through the open window. And then she started the engine and she turned the car around and she drove back down the coastal road the way she had come. She did not cry. She did about 20 miles out, at a gas station with a payphone that did not work and a hand-painted sign that said EGGS $3, pull in to fill up her tank, and she bought a cup of coffee that was not much better than his. And she stood beside her car in the morning sun with the coffee in one hand and her keys in the other, and she looked at the ocean past the road, and she thought, I have my own life now. It is mine. Nobody gave it to me. I took it back. She got in the car. She drove home. Somewhere behind her, on a porch in a small gray house, a man in a blue flannel shirt sat for a long time with an empty second mug on the rail beside him, watching the water, not going anywhere, not needing to. And somewhere further behind both of them, in a city that had kept going the way cities keep going, breathing, bleeding, forgetting, beginning again, a library opened its doors for the first morning of its existence, and a woman who had once worked the 41st floor copier brought her grandson to the children's section and set him down in a small wooden chair and put a book in his hands, and she did not know, would never know, whose building it had once been, and it did not matter. Freedom, it turned out, did not look the way Lena had imagined it would, back in the apartment with $11 in her checking account and a note under her door. It did not look like winning. It did not look like power. It did not look like a man in a dark suit in a private room who said her name once and made a whole table of other men sit down. It looked like a porch. It looked like bad coffee. It looked like a woman driving home on a coastal road with the window down, alone, unafraid, on her own clock, choosing, finally, at last, for the first time in her life, what she was going to do with the rest of her day. That, in the end, was the whole story. That, in the end, was enough.